Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1304, the War News stream. And today we have very, very big news that Russia has invaded Estonian airspace with 3 armed, and you heard right, armed Mig-31 fighter jets today. NATO has therefore invoked Article 4 against Russia, and Russia also has prepared an unknown IRBM missile test coming up in the next week or so. Big news today, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments inside the region of Europe, as the Russian Federation's air forces have conducted a violation, breach, and some have even considered an armed invasion of the airspace of the Republic of Estonia, near to the capital of Tallinn. Russian aircraft violated the airspace of the nation nearly 5 nautical miles before being intercepted by Swedish JAS-39 Gripens and being forced to turn around from their flight that was heading straight towards the capital city of Estonia. The Estonian nation has now invoked Article 4 in response to this blatant violation by the Russian air forces, while the Russian Federation has continued to deny that any such airspace violation occurred, although there is clear picture evidence of it, and have stated that no Russian aircraft entered the airspace of NATO or a NATO-affiliated country over the course of the day. Russian aircraft were also buzzing Polish petroleum and oil drilling platforms in the area just off the coast of Poland, and while the Polish have stated that this is not a direct provocation or violation of Polish sovereignty or airspace, it is once again another aggressive action being conducted by the Russian aviation wings that are based out of the city or largely oblast of Kaliningrad. The United States of America has conducted another strike today on a Venezuelan narco-boat near to the area of the coast of Venezuela, while the president of the Republic of Venezuela, Maduro, has openly stated that he believes that the United States is conducting an undeclared war against the state of Venezuela at this moment, and is largely considering the situation to be within Venezuela and the United States an actual state of war. The United States of America has continued to put out further statements at the moment about the nation of Venezuela, and better yet, at the situation in Europe, as we were able to hear that the president was very displeased with the actions of today, but nothing else has come out of that since about 12 hours since. We have also been able to hear additional details and information coming out of the Middle East, as the nation of Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, through its defensive pact with Saudi Arabia, has verified today that Pakistan will be extending a nuclear umbrella and nuclear protection to Saudi Arabia in this defensive pact. This largely means, at least from what we're understanding at the moment, that this defensive pact is entirely based in protecting Pakistan and Saudi Arabia from the Islamic Republic of Iran, and for that reason, it appears that multiple countries in the area are already creating an extra American coalition, or an extra American coalition not involving the United States, against the Islamic Republic of Iran and its blatant violations of sovereignty, and not only that, its blatant provocations amongst most nations within the area. The Afghans have also been heard today to actually be negotiating with the United States of America over the ability for U.S. forces to be based in Bagram. Not long after that, Taliban Authority came out and did state that they will no longer be allowing U.S. forces in the country under any circumstances. They generally have a running bad blood with the United States military for some reason. We have also been able to hear that the People's Republic of China has stated today that the world is at a crossroads between peace and war, in the midst of what happened in Estonia and Poland earlier today. The Russians have also openly admitted that there are now nationwide fuel shortages across the country, and on top of that, they have also continued to reiterate that the country is now in a full-scale economic depression. Even the highest voices inside the Russian Federation are no longer able to hide that fact, and while that was all going on in Russia, another CEO of another Russian company ended up getting the curbside special. That is not the window treatment, that is the curbside special, which is generally equivalent to a Russian surf and turf, as in you go surfing across the sidewalk and then you land right in the turf dead. But nevertheless, we have a large amount of news to cover over these past 24 hours, and it's been another crazy day of news. Of course, the news is not getting any quieter these days. It's getting more loud and more crazy each and every single day. And we're going to be making sure to get y'all into every single little bit of piece and detail of all of the news that has been coming out over the course of just the past 24 hours alone. And we are going to be moving y'all immediately into the area of Estonia, as we were able to hear of significant developments today that did occur around its airspace. Also, folks, if you were wondering why I sounded so confused when we went live on air, just to quickly address that, because I know some people probably had a question about that, when I clicked the buttons on my keyboard, the hotkeys, to be able to switch over from the intro to the actual show screen where we show everything on air, for some reason, when I did that, it literally closed down every single window that was open at that point, except for the Google Maps window, which was very confusing to me and very alarming, because that was everything that I would need to be able to talk about tonight, and then it all disappeared as soon as I clicked the hotkeys. I don't know why that happened, but it was incredibly weird. Nevertheless, moving us on into the area of Estonia, we were able to hear of a significant Russian violation, and largely a Russian armed invasion, of Estonian airspace that did occur for a brief time earlier today. We were able to hear and see from Estonian authorities that Russian aircraft, particularly MiG-31s, flying in tandem, flew into Estonian airspace, territorial airspace for that matter, the sovereign airspace of the Republic of Estonia, for 5 nautical miles. According to information that has been provided by Estonian authorities later in the day, the Russian MiG-31 aircraft crossed about 5 nautical miles inside of Estonian territory and headed towards the capital, Tallinn. The jets circled for about 12 minutes before NATO scrambled Italian F-35s to repel them. We have also heard additional information that Swedish JAS-39 Gripens were also scrambled to meet these MiG-31s in the air, and then we were able to see, not long after that, the actual pictures of the airspace violations and clear and undoubted proof that these Russian MiG-31s not only violated Estonian airspace, but were armed in the act. We were able to see a picture here showing a Russian MiG-31 of the Russian Air Force, most likely based out of the Leningrad military district, and as we can see in this picture here, it appears to be equipped with 3 R-73 Archer air-to-air missiles. These are generally shorter range air-to-air missiles, but nevertheless, this aircraft is armed at the time that this picture was taken, and it is entirely possible that this aircraft could have fired upon NATO forces within the airspace of Estonia, and more for that matter, this aircraft could have been a part of a larger armed action against Estonia over the course of the day if the Russian Federation decided that they would like to do that. Another
That's kind of
crazy.
wild, actually, when you really think about it. That seems to indicate that Russia went into the situation going into Estonian airspace with the understanding that they might have an air-to-air battle with the NATO forces, with their fighter jets that come to interdict the Russian jets. So that's kind of wild to see that, really. Air-to-air missiles on the wings of the fighter jet right there. Not really sure what they were really planning to do with that, because obviously we did hear that NATO jets did end up intercepting the Russian MiG-31s, but the Russians turned away when they got intercepted. So I don't know really what that was about, to be honest with you. That's kind of wild.
It is incredibly wild. It's even wilder to know that there is an endless amount of proof of this sort of a violation. We can see in the same picture of the R-73s on the wings, and we can also see them right here. The reason why we would know that they are R-73s is because of their stubbier shape and design, and also the distinctive sort of a structure that an R-73 would have. Notice the incredibly small forward fins on the missile, and the larger, blockier dorsal fins on this R-73. You can actually see those very same fins on these missiles here, showing that they are not R-27s or R-77s or any other form of a semi-active or active radar-guided missile. These are infrared missiles, all-aspect infrared missiles, with a range of about 5 miles at maximum. Still, this is incredibly concerning, the fact that this aircraft was armed when it entered NATO airspace. And not only that, for the fact that there were actually several of these MiG-31s that entered this airspace during this time today and had to be turned back by the air forces of Italy and Sweden, which responded to the situation immediately. Now, this is something that's a little bit interesting to point out to folks as well, that the Estonian Air Force did not respond. And a lot of people are going to have a question, why did the Estonian Air Force not respond? Why did Estonian air defenses not respond either? The basic answer is that Estonia does not have an air force, at least in the conventional sense. The Estonians have an air force branch on paper, but that Estonian air force branch operates a small and eclectic fleet of NATO-style helicopters. A few of them are Black Hawks, one of them is a Eurocopter, like you would see in a news coverage situation that's carrying a cameraman and a crew, and a couple of other helicopters along those lines, but the Estonian Air Force does not actually possess any real aircraft that could conduct interceptions of this variety or conduct airspace interdiction operations over the country. The Estonian Ministry of Defense also later talked about the rules of engagement that the Estonians do have about these sorts of situations, and these are the answers provided by the Estonian Prime Minister on the behalf of the Estonian Ministry of Defense. I would put it this way, there are certain parameters for the use of force. They were directed out after being given a signal, but they did not leave quickly as they could have. So Article 4 and consultations with NATO, together with the Supreme Allied Commander, will clarify what we will do next time. But NATO works, NATO is ready, and the response capability is very good. We also saw that the Prime Minister of Estonia was asked additional questions. What has to happen for us to shoot them down? The Prime Minister's response was, everything has its parameters. What I would want is for the Russians to be absolutely clear that they have no reason to wander here at all, not for us to reach the point where we start shooting them down. I think that's kind of wishful thinking at this point. But beyond that, another question was asked, but they will only understand once they are shot down. These reporters in Estonia are really throwing out the good questions. Like, honestly, these are pretty hardball questions, but the questions that have to be answered. And the Prime Minister responded, I understand that belligerence, I understand that attitude, but the direction we are taking is to ensure there is no threat to the Estonian state, to the Estonian people, or to Estonian airspace, and for the Russians to know to keep well away, as they should from all the Baltic states and Poland. Lithuania then shot back from their own Ministry of Defense, a little bit further south in the Baltics, a very interesting response that I'd have to say was a great one. The Lithuanian Defense Minister just said this simply and left it at that. Turkey set an example 10 years ago. Some food for thought. Now, what happened 10 years ago? What happened 10 years ago, just to explain to you all why this is a pretty fun sort of a statement by the Lithuanian Minister of Defense, is that in 2015, a Russian Su-24 crossed over into Turkish airspace for 17 seconds, and in response, the Turkish slammed a Patriot air defense missile right into it, shot down the Su-24, and also took the 2 pilots prisoner of that Su-24. I believe, actually, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, one of the pilots may have actually been killed in the shoot down, while the other one was captured by by the Turkish military and then returned back to Russia after the shootdown. That was in the midst of one of the most heated segments of the Syrian civil war, when the Russian Federation was conducting a large amount of air operations in support of the Assad regime inside of Syria, and the Turks really weren't all for that. And they really weren't for that, to the point that they actually shot down several Russian aircraft during that time, not just that single Su-24. A large amount of aircraft, I believe it was about 3, were shot down over the course of 2015 by the Turkish Air Defense Forces and the Turkish Air Force as well. And then the Russians never violated Turkish airspace again. Ever. They've never done it since, 10 years later. Now, moving on back into what we're seeing, at least right now, it does appear that the Russian Federation is continuing to violate NATO airspace at the moment, and as a result of that, Estonia has invoked NATO Article 4 to hold talks with allies after Russian fighter jets violated their airspace. Article 4 is a fairly interesting one, and let me go get the NATO charter for y'all really quickly to read y'all exactly what Article 4 is. There's been a lot of questions today about what is Article 4, and Article 4 is one of the shortest articles in the NATO charter, and this is what it is. The parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. So what this is the equivalent, for those who are in America, of your legal free phone call consultation with an attorney's office. That's pretty much what Article 4 is. It doesn't mean that there's going to be any sort of armed action happening. Armed action could result from an Article 4 invocation if through that consultation it's then decided that it is worthy of an Article 5 invocation of a direct attack or a violation of sovereignty against NATO's collective defense. But at the moment it does not appear that that will be happening. But still, Estonia is consulting its allies inside of NATO at the moment about the blatant violation of the Russian Federation conducted today that was fully armed, from what we were able to see by the picture and video evidence. A load of people are talking about those Russian MiGs, which were 3 in number, which is actually a little bit crazy to think that they had 3 fully armed MiG-31s inside of Estonian airspace for about at least 12 minutes before they were even intercepted by a NATO aircraft, the JAS-39 Gripens and the F-35s from Italy. And then they were escorted out of the airspace, which took even longer amounts of minutes, meaning that they were within NATO airspace for roughly about 20 minutes or so. That is giving us an idea that this is probably one of the most blatant violations of NATO airspace conducted by conventional aircraft since the Polish drone incursions, which was an unconventional air incursion that occurred about a week and a half ago, and also the additional air incursions that happened inside of Romania simultaneously. A lot of people are wondering whether or not NATO forces should have shot down those MiG-31s as a signal to the Russian Federation that no airspace violations will be tolerated any further, and any other attempted airspace violations will result in the loss of aircraft and life of the Russian Federation's armed forces and of the Air Force in particular. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so the big question is, should NATO have shot down those Russian MiGs? And it looks like 52% said yes, Russia won't stop otherwise, while 23% said only if they were a lethal threat to Estonia, and 19% said no, that would have been World War III if those jets got shot down. So this is a very, very bold thing that Russia did today. They kept the 3 armed MiGs, and that's very important to say that. They were armed with missiles. They weren't unarmed. They had literally missiles on the wings of these fighter jets. They circled around Vainluu Island, which is an island right off Estonia's coast in the Gulf of Finland, for about 12 minutes. And they were actually on a flight course originally to go to Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia. So that was their original destination, was the capital. In 12 minutes, they could have ran a sortie on Tallinn if they wanted to. They could have actually gone all the way to the capital in those 12 minutes. So obviously that's a big breach by NATO defenses right there. NATO was not ready once again to intercept those jets. Apparently they didn't have early warning that they were going to arrive or violate the airspace. I don't know what the deal was, but NATO was really late in responding to that yet again. Honestly, it seems like NATO's getting caught off guard pretty much every time these days that Russia tries a new aggression. NATO's getting caught off guard, which is a bad precedent that's being set here. But when it comes to shooting down the Russian jets, I say we should follow Turkey's lead. Turkey shot down the Russian jet, and that's what Estonia should have done as well. This is the 3rd time this month that this has happened, and this time it was much worse. They were there for a long time. The last 2 times, they were there for a much shorter period of time. So shooting it down would have been totally justified, since it is the 3rd time this month that this has occurred. So I'm with the 53%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that, in my opinion, I would be with 53%. These aircraft should be shot down without any further questions, and that should be the procedure from here forward, is that any Russian aircraft to violate NATO airspace will be shot down instantaneously, without any further delay or any questioning of the order. The orders will be followed to the letter. These aircraft will be shot down. In the incident of the 2015 Russian Sukhoi Su-24 shootdown, as you can see here, this is the actual Sukhoi Su-24 that was shot down during that incident, number 83, I believe out of Cheklovsk Air Base. The Turkish Air Force, using an F-16, intercepted this Su-24 17 seconds into its airspace and then shot it down instantly, resulting in the death of the co-pilot and the survival of the pilot, who then parachuted into Turkish territory and then was taken prisoner by the Turkish Armed Forces and then later repatriated into the Russian Federation. This is something that is a little bit interesting for all of y'all to note here really quickly, is that if you look at all the responses at the time from at least the NATO forces, or at least NATO nations at the time, the NATO Secretary General backed Turkey's assessment of the engagement, offered solidarity with Turkey, and called for both sides to de-escalate the situation, while the United States of America at that time, once again considering, folks, that the Turks had just shot down a Russian Air Force aircraft and killed one of their pilots, had called the Turkish president in a phone call, stated support for the country's right to defend its sovereignty, and that it was important to find out exactly what had happened and to prevent further escalation. The Department of State spokesperson also stated that the Turks had the right to self-defense, and the United States announced a new list of economic sanctions on Russian and Syrian individuals and companies as a response of this situation, making it incredibly clear, at least at the time, that the United States of America was a lot more gung-ho in facing down the Russian Federation and clearly showing them the violations of our sovereignty were not going to be tolerated under any circumstance, and that any NATO forces were entirely justified in shooting down any of these aircraft that entered NATO airspace at any time. We may be on the verge of World War III right now, and I'd have to be honest with you all, the Syrian Civil War and Russia and America's involvement in the Syrian Civil War never really got close to being on the knife's edge of starting a third world war. But one thing is incredibly clear: when we're on this sort of a knife's edge of possibly entering the largest conflict in history, maybe this is the time that we definitely need to have a spine, and we need to start shooting these sorts of aircraft down. They entered Estonian airspace armed with missiles. Whether they were R-73s, R-27s, R-77s, or any other types of air-to-air missiles that the Russian Federation possesses, these aircraft were armed aircraft of an enemy nation's armed forces entering the airspace of Estonia and the NATO alliance as a whole without any authorization or permission by NATO authorities, by Estonian authorities, or by anyone for that matter. When the Russian Federation starts to erode away the airspace and the sovereignty of states like these within this region, we are begging at this point for them to continue these escalations as far as they can without any limitations, without stopping. The Turks did show an amazing example in 2015 of what kind of response is appropriate in these situations. The NATO forces in the area, including Italy and Sweden's aircraft, should have engaged these MiG-31s and shot them down instantaneously. There should be no question about that further on, and I believe that one of the results of this Article 4 invocation and the consultation amongst NATO allies is that the standing orders for all NATO forces in the Baltics and along the eastern frontier of NATO at this moment should be that if any Russian aircraft attempt to enter or enter NATO airspace at any point in the future and are not operating within the parameters of international law or within international airspace and waters, those vessels, vehicles, and forces are to be engaged and destroyed without any further questions and without any authorization from a higher level of command. That should just be the standing order, and that should be followed through. That would be my honest opinion on that. A lot of people have been talking about NATO's unpreparedness to respond to these Russian threats, and this wasn't the only one of the day. I'd like to add that in really quickly. This airspace violation north of Tallinn was not the only airspace violation that we saw over the course of the day. Also, before we move on, I do want to make sure to take the moment to show y'all some more pictures that were taken of the MiG-31s right here. These were duplicates, just in case we didn't have any, but I want to remind y'all again.
That is an ugly plane, by the way. Like, the MiG-31 is one, like, horrible-looking, ugly plane. Like, that thing is so pitifully designed. Like, the design of the thing is just hideous.
These are an evolution of the even uglier MiG-25 Foxbat, which was even worse. This is what the MiG-31 actually evolved out of.
Yeah, it's like they really didn't add any like curves or anything to it. It's all straight edges and it's all like a huge hunk of just steel. It's just there's no real finesse to the design at all. It's just as blah.
Well, you know what's interesting actually about the original MiG-25 is that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and some folks can correct me on this was the first and I think one of the only aircraft in the entirety of the world that its skin was made entirely out of stainless steel, which made this aircraft insanely heavy, and that's why it has such a large wing profile and also such large engines, is because that was what was needed just to get this heavy-ass plane off of the ground. And beyond that, the MiG-31 and the MiG-25 really are not capable aircraft, at least in terms of air-to-air combat. They are pretty much completely useless. Even the MiG-31, which was supposed to be an improvement on the MiG-25, still largely has the same problems and faults of its earlier predecessor, the MiG-25. Outside of that, though, these aircraft are damn near horrendous looking. They really do look like flying bricks of steel. They pretty much are. They are mostly made of stainless steel. And carrying R-73s of all missiles, still armed, still dangerous, but probably one of the worst displays of force the Russians could make, at least in this violation. If they sent in an Su-30, that would be concerning, but the MiG-31s are pretty bad. But we also heard, speaking of those continued airspace violations I was talking about just a second ago, that down in the direction of Poland today, some Russian aircraft of an unknown type, as we haven't really heard exactly what type of Russian aircraft these were, conducted low-altitude passes over Poland's Petro-Baltic oil and gas platforms off of their coast in the Baltic Sea, according to the Polish border guards, which stated this information today. And according to their quote, Polish airspace was not violated, the military's reaction was not necessary. But this is another attempt at a provocation by the Russian Federation against the NATO states in this area right now, and it's the second one of the day. It's not the first one of the day, this was the second one of the day. This happened about an hour and a half after the original violations occurred inside of Estonia, and literally about 30 minutes after Matthew published his video earlier today. That also happened down near Poland. So we now have two provocations by the Russian Federation, one on Polish oil platforms inside the Baltic, and another that was a literal armed violation of Estonian airspace near to their capital, which is the largest and most important city inside of the Republic of Estonia. And a lot of people are wondering, why in the world is NATO so unprepared to deal with this Russian aggression currently? Responses take a while, about 12 minutes, or they're largely lackluster. Now with the Polish not even giving a response to the oil platforms that actually have Polish workers on board being buzzed by Russian aircraft that we are also assuming are armed based on the precedent that was laid off north of Tallinn today. And a lot of people are wondering, why in the world is this the case? Why in the world are there no larger responses being made by NATO forces anywhere in the Baltics or Eastern Europe right now? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so it looks like 45% of the audience, the largest choice here, said no. NATO is simply unwilling to act right now. It's not that they're unprepared, they're simply unwilling. While 39% said NATO isn't prepared to handle the situation, and 11% said it seems like incompetence. And I think, honestly, it's a bit of a lack of a unified response. NATO right now is kind of fractured because the U.S. is considered the chair or the seat of NATO, in my personal opinion. They're the largest member of NATO, therefore they get the largest voice. So the U.S. is sort of not really taking a very strong stance against Russia right now. They're sort of on the fence. And I think that's creating confusion amongst the NATO allies because if for example, if Estonia decides to shoot down a Russian jet and the U.S. didn't want that, is the U.S. then going to back out of their obligation to protect Estonia if they don't like that action? I think that's what Estonia is worried about. So NATO is prepared to handle it. I believe they truly are, but they're simply unwilling to handle it because there's not a cohesive messaging right now amongst the allies. So I think that's the problem. It's bureaucracy and diplomacy amongst the allies that's the problem. It's not the situation between NATO and Russia. It's literally NATO doesn't have its shit together right now. I think that's the main problem. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 45% as well. NATO just doesn't have it together. I would really have to be with all three of the options. NATO isn't prepared to handle, it's unwilling to handle, and it's incompetent to handle the situation currently. There is no centralized leadership in NATO right now giving clear orders of deterrence that are supposed to dissuade a conflict through strong actions like we should have conducted today. We are not prepared to handle the situation because we also just don't have the aptitude for it, or the appetite for it, if you want to put it that way. We're unwilling to, because for some reason we're extremely terrified of the Russians, even though it's quite clear at the moment we're guaranteed to be going into a war with them by now. The Russians are just going to keep pushing the envelope until they start it anyways. And then we're also largely just incompetent to a degree, because there's so many people who want to stick their heads in the sand in the West and pretend like this isn't an issue, that they're going to let it become an issue. It's an absolutely pitiful sort of a situation to be in right now for NATO and the alliance as a whole, because it's quite truly a joke, folks. It's quite truly a joke. And I see some people saying, well, it's smart not to shoot them down, and it's called not falling for a Russian trap. Well, Turkey fell for their trap back in 2015. And shot down a plane and killed one of their pilots in the process of doing that. And we fell for the trap back then, and Russia had backed off because they were actually scared of a larger NATO response as a result of that. So I'm pretty sure that if you shot down a MiG over Estonia, or if you shot down a MiG down near Poland, or a Sukhoi down near Poland, whichever one it was, I have a feeling that that would probably get the Russians to back off a little bit, because the Russians do not respect anything other than strength. And if you believe otherwise, and you think that being a coward and tucking your tail between your legs and letting the Russians do whatever they want, like a lot of people in this country and in the West like to do these days, is whenever they're faced with an asshole or a bully or someone who just takes advantage of people, they all tuck their tail between their legs and just hope and pray that the situation doesn't get worse. And if we just let them do what they want, they'll eventually go away. And that's never the case. That never happens. And you have to shoot down an aircraft and maybe maim a Russian pilot in the process of that to get the example across to the Russians that we don't deal with that kind of crap. And if they want to do that, they can do that to some Central Asian country that really can't stand on their own two legs, but not NATO and not our alliance. We're a little bit higher and mightier than that to let some Russian piece of junk that's made of stainless steel, that was made with yesteryear's tech, being flown by people who can hardly even understand what they're actually doing and what kind of action they're taking, continue to violate the sovereignty and airspace of a great and wonderful country like Estonia, or for any other country in NATO, and to continue to try and terrorize these people around the world in our alliance here in America with the threat of a looming war. If they want a war, we'll give them a war. They ought to not be in our airspace. That's the simple matter. They decided to come into our airspace. We have the response to shoot these aircraft down. That's how it works. If you don't want your aircraft shot down, don't fly into our airspace.
And also, how do you think Russia would react if we did that to them? Like, for example, imagine if we flew fighter jets over Kaliningrad or something. I have a very strong suspicion that Russia would shoot our jet down in a heartbeat. They wouldn't let it sit there for 5 seconds. They'd probably shoot the thing down. So Russia would not afford us the same type of leniency that we're giving them. But yet NATO's taking that approach on their end. So someone's got to take the lead in NATO. Like, somebody has got to be the leader of it. The U.S. has got to step up and take the reins like they've always done, or, you know, somebody else in NATO might take the reins instead. That's just the way it's going to be.
That's how it is going to be. That's how the cookie crumbles at the end of the day, as some people say. It's just so stupid, folks. I don't really know what in the world's going on these days, and I really don't know what in the world's up with the calls for cowardice these days. Some people don't get it, and they never will, that cowardice is going to end up getting people killed. Well, no matter what action we take at this point, people might end up getting killed in a larger war. But it would be a lot better to take actions that are actually in our defense than not. Because you know what's crazy, folks, is that there is a camp of people, pretty much everyone in America and in the West, it's like 70% of people, according to polling, are in support of Ukraine, are against the Russians, and about 90% of America has an extremely negative outlook of Putin. There is only a small amount of people in this country that actually think that the Russian Federation is a nice country, that Putin is a nice guy, or that there is no point in defending the West. But what is so stupid about that little percentage of people is that while they'll sit there and say, we ought to let Putin steamroll us and roll us over and do whatever they want, and we ought to just take it, if a home invader came into their house, they wouldn't even say the same thing. They wouldn't sit there and say, oh, let's just, drop our guns and just let the guy rob us and get whatever he wants out of our house, and then run away and not call the cops because hopefully nothing will come out of this. No, they would tell you to take the most aggressive actions possible and even go overboard in that sort of a situation, which is where I don't even get how people get away with saying this kind of stupid stuff and thinking that it makes sense these days, because you certainly do not incentivize the Russians calming down by letting them do whatever they want. Back in the day, back when I was a kid, which wasn't even that long ago, when you sat there and you had a tantrum, you didn't get away with it, you got spanked pretty badly, and that taught you to not go and throw tantrums. The Russians keep keep throwing tantrums inside of our airspace by flying their aircraft in them armed with weaponry and acting like they're going to get away with that. The way you put that tantrum down is you spank a couple of Russian pilots by shooting them down out of the sky with a Patriot up their ass. That's how you do that. That's how you teach them a lesson. And then I can promise you that either they're going to start doing that a good bit more, and then they're going to really learn what not to mess with NATO about, or they're going to stop. Either way, though, this is not going to keep on going on, or it should not be allowed to keep going on. And we are seeing that largely the Russians are once again insulting us and insulting the intelligence of NATO countries by stating this today. 3 Russian Mig-31s carried out a scheduled flight from Karelia to the Kaliningrad region. Estonian airspace was not violated, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. It was violated. They were literally photographed inside of Estonian airspace. That's where the pictures came from, inside of Estonia today. So the Russians are just...
You know the crazy part? I saw people literally arguing today on Twitter. There was multiple people arguing those. Some were Russian accounts and some were, NATO affiliated accounts. People were arguing that somehow the Russians had a GPS error that made them end up going over Venezuelan Island, which is the airspace of Estonia they violated. There is no evidence whatsoever of this being any type of GPS interference or malfunction. There is no evidence of that. And the proof that this is not an accident is it's the 3rd time this month that it's happened. And this time it was 3 armed MiGs. They sent in 3 this time. It wasn't just one, it was multiple fighter jets. So, people trying to make the argument that it's somehow unintentional, that just doesn't hold any water, because otherwise, why are they sending more, and why are they sending them literally closer to the capital of Estonia this time? And also, why are they buzzing Poland's oil rigs? They're doing that simultaneously while they're also invading Estonia's airspace, and it's happening more frequently.
Also, more importantly, if they didn't know they were in Estonian airspace, then why was it at that exact time and moment when they entered Estonian airspace, they literally stopped flying in a straight line and started flying orbits for 12 minutes until NATO aircraft responded? It's a blatant violation just by that action alone. They knew they were in Estonian airspace. Who in the world's going to go, okay, we're conducting a regular routine flight from Karelia, which is up here near Finland, through the Gulf of Finland and down to Kaliningrad through the Baltic. So in the midst of our flight in the Gulf of Finland, let's just start running loops just north of Estonia for no reason at all, exactly inside their airspace, and then try and feign ignorance or have people explain it away as ignorance. They knew exactly what they were doing, and that's why we should have exactly given them a Patriot to take home with them. And then they would have learned a little lesson. Maybe a couple of AIM-120s, or AIM-9s, or AIM-7s, or whatever you want to throw at them. But teach them a little lesson. They can fly orbits all they want out in the Baltic Sea and international airspace, but not in ours. That's not going to happen. That ought to be the message.
Yeah, do you think that actually, because like I mentioned originally, these 3 MiG-31s were actually on their way to Estonia? They were on their way to the capital, according to their flight path. That's where they were trying to go for. But the circling around Venezuelan Island in the Gulf of Finland, which is still Estonian airspace, it seems like Russia almost was kind of surprised they were able to make it that far without being intercepted, because the circling around Venezuela, that seems like they were stalling. Like they were like, hey, where's the NATO jets? Like they should have intercepted us by now. But even the Russians, it seems like, in my personal opinion, were kind of surprised they didn't get intercepted earlier. It took 12 entire minutes, and 12 minutes is like an eternity. That's a long period of time for an enemy jets, especially 3 of them that are armed, to circle around NATO airspace. That's like hours in like a normal time when it comes to like defensive measures. That's crazy.
It's just absolutely insane. I really have no clue how in the world this would even be allowed to happen. I mean, 12 minutes in an air war sense is an eternity, like you're saying. In 12 minutes, an aircraft like that, like a MiG-31 traveling subsonic, could have made it well over to Lynn and conducted an airstrike on the Estonian government and killed the president of Estonia if they had wanted to by that point, or wiped out about half the parliament if they were in session. They could have done something like that. 12 minutes is more than enough time to do something like that and be about all the way out of Estonian airspace by the time anyone's even flying towards you to respond. I mean, the kind of response time here was absolutely abysmal. I mean, it was terrible, honestly. A 12-minute response time to get an aircraft into the air alone to even respond to the MiG-31s. And on top of that, another thing that's a little bit interesting about this whole deal is that there were 3 MiG-31s that did this. It wasn't a small little problem that was had today. It was an entire air wing's worth of Russian MiGs that were in Estonian airspace for 12 minutes. Do y'all know what happened back in the day? Way back in the day, back in, I think it was 1953, when 2 U.S. F-84s crossed the border or the airspace into Austria, inside of, well, actually, I believe it was into Czechoslovakia in 1953. The Soviets engaged those aircraft and shot down one of our F-84s because we violated their airspace. The American aircraft had only gone into their airspace by about a mile, and immediately a dogfight began, and they shot down one F-84, and the other one had to come running back across the border. That's what happened back then. When a Russian Su-24 violated Turkey's airspace for 17 seconds, which is a NATO ally, Turkey shot down that Su-24. Russia decided to back off because they didn't want the heat. Now we sit there and let them fly around in Estonian airspace for 12 minutes. It takes us 12 minutes to get a plane up. It takes us even longer to get them out of the airspace. And then our response is, we're going to sit here and talk about it, and we're going to do nothing further than that. It's a really crazy sort of, I cannot get this across, folks. What we're seeing right now is absolutely insano as far as our responses to current escalations that the Russians are making. It's absolutely insano. We're not in a situation like Venezuela where they're scared to strike back at the U.S. because the U.S. will curb stomp them. We are the NATO alliance. If anyone's going to get curb stomped, it's going to be them. The Russians, that is. So why in the world are we acting like we're scared of the Russians? The Russians are not a force to be feared. The Ukrainians, which generally were considered to be a backwater army at the beginning of the war, have been beating the Russians and besting them for 3.5 years. That gives me a pretty good idea that even with the drone warfare side of things being in their advantage right now, they probably still wouldn't have a chance in hell of actually facing down NATO. And if we faced them down and told them, look, we're not going to let you start the war on your terms when you're comfortable, we'll start it right here and right now if you want to keep doing this stupid crap, they are going to back off and completely drop the whole situation with NATO because they're going to realize, wow, NATO actually will come over here and pretty much level the Kremlin if they wanted to, probably within a week, and there's really not a lot that we can do about this, so it's better to back off and leave them alone. And then
I just wonder what's going to come out of the NATO Article 4 meeting this time, because nobody really heard about it because it really wasn't publicized that much. But the Article 4 meeting that Poland requested actually did take place. It took place in Brussels. It didn't get much media coverage at all. But what came out of that Article 4 meeting was NATO Eastern Sentinel. That was the operation that came out of it, and that was the official response that came out of that Article 4 meeting. So now with Estonia also requesting Article 4 consultations, technically we should see some response other than just a strongly worded statement. There should be some type of military response that comes out of it if they also follow the same situation that Poland did. So I'll be curious to see what they're planning to do with that, because basically the only thing that I could see that they could do outside of aggressing on Russia, which I really doubt they're going to do at all because NATO's really not taking an approach like that right now, is they could technically upgrade the radar systems in Estonia so that way they have a much earlier warning when these Russian jets are coming in. I think that might be the likelihood of that option right there. Could be that. Also, I see Weldon saying invoke Article 5. 0% chance of that happening, by the way. They are definitely not going to be invoking Article 5. I can pretty much rule that one out right now. Definitely not happening. But they'll probably try to bolster the military capabilities. That's my guess.
That's what I would assume. And I also see some people saying some things like, well, Ukraine wasn't really a backwater army. They were, like, having a large military does not mean it's a competent military or at least a well-equipped military. Ukraine did have a standing army of 270,000 men when the invasion of Ukraine began, but they were using entirely at that time Soviet-era technology, just like the Russians. If you're calling the Russian Federation's army right now a backwater army, like we do, then you would have to just deduce by the knowledge of that the Ukrainian armed forces, even 270,000 men strong, was a backwater army because they were using nothing but Russian tech. Since then, they've modernized a great deal and have also become the pioneers of drone warfare, and have pretty much become one of the best and most competent armed forces that is in Europe by far, without a doubt at this point. But at the beginning of the war, they certainly were not. And that is something that you have to keep in mind, is that the Ukrainians were beating the Russians with their own equipment in 2022. There was nothing that had been added yet. yet, nothing that had been given by the West, at least in any large amounts. It was entirely Soviet era. Then they started to bring in the Western tech. They started to bring in mass drone production by 2023 and the early part of 2024, and they completely changed the face of the game and are pretty much a Western fighting force at this point. But that's something important to point out, is that if the Russians can't take on a country that was equally armed as them in 2022, how in the world do they think they're going to do against a force that is incredibly well armed? And they're even having a problem fighting Ukraine right now because the Ukrainians are armed similarly to their counterparts inside of NATO. But I would have to say this is something that is incredibly wild to me, crazy to me that this is happening right now around Baltic airspace, and once again, the responses are lackluster. We were able to hear from the President of the United States today that there is going to be a little bit of a look at this whole thing, and when asked about the situation, the President stated, "They're going to be briefing me in a short while. I don't love it. There could be big trouble." We've heard similar statements like that, and generally nothing's come out of it, so we're expecting that nothing will come out of this as well at this point, because it seems like NATO is just hamstrung and not doing anything at all to respond to Russian aggression against our alliance. Not against Ukraine, but against our alliance itself. But anyways, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news that we have for the day, because there is still quite a significant amount, and we were able to hear some additional information coming out of Venezuela today, as the United States of America did confirm that we have conducted our third attack against a narco-boat, apparently this one most likely operated by Tren de Aragua, inside the territorial waters of Venezuela, and we were able to see the clips here showing the vessel being hit. These videos are unclassed and were published right after the strike occurred today, and you can actually see here in infrared and in color the strike itself. You can see the vessel getting hit immediately. It appears to have been at speed when it was hit, and then the vessel rapidly comes to a stop and becomes a burning blaze, oil spreading across the water and also continuing to burn on the surface of the water as the boat now is adrift.
Also, what kind of missile was that hit it, by the way? That was a huge munition, whatever that was.
I really don't know. I actually was trying to find that out, and I have absolutely no clue what kind of a weapon that could have been today, because usually most air-to-ground munitions are actually a little bit stubbier. But here's a picture of the supposed ordnance that did hit the vessel, and I have no clue. Maybe it's just that the ordnance is traveling at a higher speed, so it was elongated in this frame, but I'm not really sure. I couldn't really tell you. But it was quite a large explosive, and it did cause a pretty large boom, at least on the water, when it hit the boat. There's not really a lot that was explosive on the boat. We also had this, once again, freeze frame of the impact showing the ordnance that hit, and once again, folks, I can not really be certain as to what that is. It's incredibly large. it's incredibly large, so I don't know what it could be. Nevertheless, the president also issued a statement today about the matter and stated as follows: "On my orders, the Secretary of War ordered a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel affiliated with a designated terrorist organization conducting narco-trafficking in the U.S. Southcom area of responsibility. Intelligence confirmed the vessel was trafficking illicit narcotics and was transiting along a known narco-trafficking passage en route to poison Americans. The strike killed 3 male narco-terrorists aboard the vessel, which was in international waters. No U.S. forces were harmed in this strike." Then stated an additional appeal: "Stop selling fentanyl, narcotics, and illegal drugs in America and committing violence and terrorism against Americans." So it appears that this is another extenuation of the U.S. campaign that's been conducted in and around Venezuelan waters against drug vessels and narco-terrorism, which has largely been a greater campaign of the United States at this point. Nicolas Maduro decreed the attack today, stating that the United States is waging an undeclared war in the Caribbean against the nation of Venezuela, at least according to his claims. We also were able to see that as of today, the forces in the area are once again evolving a little bit more, and we have been able to get a little bit of a better breakdown on what exactly is present and operational inside of Puerto Rico as a part of the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard's forces that are currently there right now. We were able to see that 3 MQ-9 Reapers are based at the Rafael Hernandez International Airport within northwestern Puerto Rico, while the Luis Munoz Marine International Airport inside of the city, I believe, of San Juan itself, let me make sure that I'm getting that correct, It is San Juan. I did get that correct. Or two Poseidons. We also understand that at the President Roosevelt Roads Naval Station, there are about 10 F-35Bs of the United States Marine Corps, along with some Ospreys and CH-53 Super Stallions, which are also operating from Roosevelt Roads Naval Station. On top of that, inside of the port of Ponce, we understand that at the moment, moored inside the port is USS Lake Erie, USS Gravely, and USS Jason Dunham. And inside of the United States Coast Guard Sector San Juan, Coast Guard Station San Juan, is the three U.S. Coast Guard cutters, Joseph Tizanos, Heriberto Hernand, Joseph Doyle, and also the Richard Dixon, which is a little play on the wiretapping side of things. But there does appear to be a larger force present inside of Puerto Rico at the moment, and it does appear that the United States is now expanding the U.S. Coast Guard cutters that are present within the area to most likely conduct close-in on near-shore operations or littoral operations in the case of Venezuelan subterfuge or infiltration groups attempting to make their way towards the island of Puerto Rico, where the U.S. is pretty much conducting a staging operation at the moment. A lot of people have been talking about the developments down here inside of the Caribbean and what the United States, or largely the Venezuelans, are going to be doing here in the future. And what in the world is Maduro going to be doing? What's Maduro doing? Is he going to eat an empanada? Is he going to run away? Is he going to give up? What's he going to do? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So today, the U.S. did release footage showing that new Venezuelan boat strike, and it's assumed that footage is a little bit old, maybe a couple days old, but we got it today. So will this push Maduro to act with this new strike on the boat? 61% said no, Maduro will run and hide yet again, while 18% said yes, Maduro will lash out in a panic and attack the U.S. forces, and 15% said it's a 50-50 chance of it. So this is a bit of a tricky one right here because Maduro, I'm sure, is panicking. He really has no other option than to panic right now because he has the entire United States military busting down his door, basically, literally taking people out right beyond the borders of their waters there in Venezuela. So I think Maduro will run and hide again. That's pretty much his only option as well. I don't think he's going to lash out and panic because that would create a very bad situation for him and pretty much immediately cause the destruction of his regime. So as the old saying or the new saying goes, Maduro can't enduro. But Enforcer, what say you?
Maduro can enduro. Where the hell did that come from?
You know, like enduro, like endure. Maduro can't enduro.
Who made that up? Did you just make that up right now?
I just made it up right now. I used all my cells in my brain. I thought, what's a good way to buzzwords, modern buzzwords and stuff. I was trying to do a little trendy thing and stuff like that. That was right now on the spot.
I'm not gonna lie. We should put that on the shirt. That was actually a pretty good. That was actually a pretty good one. I was like, who in the world made that up? I was like, that's pretty creative. But I would have to say that I'm with the 60%. Maduro can't enduro. Just to coin that phrase here on the channel. That was heard here first, folks. We came up with that one. And I would have to say that Maduro is most likely going to flee. That would be my opinion. Usually, Central American and South American governments really don't have this persistence that a large amount of other governments would, and for that reason, if they come under any sort of significant strikes or military campaigns, Maduro is most likely going to just try and pack up and flee at that point. That's usually what we see inside of South and Central American countries whenever they're faced with any sort of U.S. military intervention or action inside their country. So I'd have to be with the 59%, just based on the historical precedent. It's highly likely that Maduro would make a run for it. So I hope that addresses that the best.
What are the odds? What are the odds, man, that the U.S. president picks that phrase up? That sounds like something that he might come up with or something, to be honest with you. I would not be shocked, folks, if you see, and also this will confirm we're being listened to by some people. If we suddenly hear that out of the blue, that's like something, right? They gotta pay people millions to sit down and come up with stuff like that. I just did it for free. Honestly, totally free. If the people want to use that, for example, politicians want to use that phrase right there, of course they can contribute to the cult of Matt if they would like to. Come here to this channel and help out with this crowdfunded news right here. I'm telling you what.
They could give it a shot. And folks, if you hear Maduro can enduro from anyone in the government, you can guarantee they're watching the show. That's a promise at that point. They're watching the show, because I haven't heard that anywhere today. That's why I had to ask Mandy. I was like, where did that come from? Because I was like, I have never heard that phrase before over the course of everything going on in Venezuela. And I was like, that one's new. That one's fresh. I was like, did we just come up with that? And we did. So we'll have to see if that is coined somewhere in the U.S. government. And if it is, then they're watching the show. So anyways, with that, I would generally have to believe Maduro would flee. That would be my honest opinion. I'd have to be with a large majority of y'all that said that. And so we're going to be moving us on over and on into the rest of the news that we have for the night that has come out of East Asia, Central Asia, the middle of the East, the Russian Federation itself, and the front lines in Ukraine, as well as a little bit of additional news that came out of Poland today, because there was a little bit of additional tidbits of news that came out within that area. But before we even move on into that news, I do have to say that we are massively honored by the 14,000 people who were here at the peak tonight, and the 57,000 people who have watched this stream in the first hour alone. We're entirely honored and appreciative to have had each and every single one of y'all here tonight, and if y'all have been enjoying this channel, please make sure to subscribe. We run these streams each and every single day, 6 days a week, except for Mondays, at the same time every night. You can always count on us to be here and to cover all of the news that's been going on around the world. And if y'all would like to subscribe, we'd always be happy to have y'all. Make sure to join the Enforcer channel. Y'all will enjoy it a great deal. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into that second segment, and before we get on into the second segment of the news, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions from y'all before we move on into it. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so grabbing our 3 super chat questions before we move back into the news, this one goes to Bobby43, also known as LC39A, and a huge shout to you, Bobby, for that massive $150 support. And that is the largest super chat of the night thus far. And we do appreciate that very much, Bobby, and it's that support that keeps the channel running, like we always say every single time. And Bobby said, the NATO mentality is no harm, no foul.
Honestly, that's true, but I find a problem with that sort of a logic because there is a harm and there is a foul that comes with this sort of a deal, and it's a poison that's going to kill NATO slowly from within if we don't realize that, because that's what everyone thought leading up to World War II. No harm, no foul. Let the Nazis do what they want. If we just keep letting them do what they want, eventually they'll stop being a problem and they'll go away. Herr Hitler won't be a huge nuisance to everyone in the future, and then he was. And it just shows that letting these people get away with whatever they want and just continuously having this idea of no harm and no foul, it's devastating historically. There's just no historical precedence where that has ever turned out well. Like, for example, the Russians are a perfect example of that, because all of the Russian princes, when the Mongols invaded their country, they said back then, oh, no harm, no foul. Let the Mongolians do what they want, and as long as they're not hurting us, we will be fine with it. And that's why the Russians still have an exploitative system of government and an exploitative cultural and social system to this day, is because they had the idea of no harm, no foul about 800 years ago, and it still haunts them to this day. Because every Russian thinks, oh, no harm, no foul. Just sit back and don't pay attention to anything and let anyone do what they want. And as long as they don't hurt me, then it's not my problem. And then if they hurt you, it's your problem. But no one else is going to stand up for you or help you out or anything. They're just going to let you get screwed over. And that's the end of it. And it's a real big issue. It's a huge problem these days. People have got to face down these enemy countries like they are. They are enemies of our alliance. They are enemies of the West. They are openly wanting to eventually kill us, put us under. They're trying to do everything they can to screw us over in every single way. And people who sit here and don't see that and continue to say that we need to back off and that we need to be cowardly, we need to let the Russians do what they want, you are a coward. Like, I'm just going to be just straight up to those people. You are an absolute coward, because if you have that kind of mindset, what would you say if an armed burglar broke into your house with you right there with a wife and kids inside your house, and that burglar told you he was about to do terrible things to you, your family, your wife, your children, and rob you and everything, and then leave? Would you just sit there and go, okay, if I don't do anything and don't resist, hopefully it won't be that bad and he'll just leave? No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't at all, because then it affects you. This affects all of us in a larger way, just like that would. And sitting there and saying, oh, I would just let them do whatever they want, I just back off and do nothing. You're the kind of coward that would sell out your wife, your children, everything that you've ever worked for and fought for in your whole life, just to sit there and go, oh, well, hopefully they won't hurt me too badly. Hopefully it'll just be a little grazing of a sort. And I don't really have a lot of respect for people like that, you know, because there are a lot of, like, what is crazy to me, folks, is that there are people in this country who will sit there and say stuff like, when a home invader comes into your house, don't even give them any quarter, just blast them. And then those same people will sit there and say, okay, so when the Russians are invading our house, which is the NATO alliance, we're just going to sit back and let them do whatever they want. And even if they end up harming or killing people, we'll just justify it and bury it and just pretend like that's not our problem. That is just crazy. I don't really know how people don't get the parallels between the two and that the response should be the same. Because when you sit there and you make it fairly clear, like maybe with a little no trespassing sign, trespassers will have unfortunate things happen to them, especially if they're trying to invade your house. That usually detracts people from doing something because they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to mess around today because today might be my last. Then that's the kind of mindset that the Russians ought to be having when dealing with NATO, is that they ought to not mess with us, because the day that they mess with us might end up being one of their final days as a nation. That's the kind of mindset they should be in. Instead, they've got everyone in NATO in that mindset. Oh, if we push back against the Russians, today might be our last. Why the hell should we be in fear? Why should we? We have the largest economy on the planet as a unified military alliance. We have the largest armed force on the planet as a unified military alliance. There is no reason for us to be in fear of the Russians. The Russians should be in fear of us. And we're letting them, because some people want to be cowards and people are spineless these days, run us over and make the whole alliance live in fear of what they're about to do, instead of it being the other way around, which is how it should be. It's just craziness to me. I don't really understand how people are trying to justify that. But I'd agree with you 100%, Bobby 43. That is the NATO mindset these days, and there's a huge problem with it, and that should change immediately. To the folks, one more thing, to the folks who want to say that I'm wrong and I'm a war hawk and a warmonger for wanting to stand down aggression and not let people bully us and beat us up all over the world, it's fine. It's fine. When you get drafted one day because your spineless decisions got us all into a third world, like everyone's spineless decisions leading up to World War II did, and you're out there on the front line, and you and me are there, and we're getting shelled by the Russians or a little drones whizzing over our head, I'm going to look at you and say, what a fool you were. That's what I'm going to say, because we're all going to be there one day on the front. That's just going to be the reality of it. And you're going to be sitting there going, I just didn't expect this. I thought if we rolled over and let them do whatever we want, we'd not have a problem. And you're going to end up being wrong. And I'll have to be there with you because of your own bad decisions and sorts of judgment that you had. And you weren't able to read history, and you didn't have enough sense, and you didn't have enough spine, and you didn't have enough gumption to go and stand up against these kinds of people and tell our elected representatives that we ought to be facing them down, so that way we could try and avoid something like this. Because if it's going to happen either way, if that's what y'all are thinking out there, if it's going to happen either way, why not face them down and at least show that we got a spine and stand on principle for once, and stand on the business that we always have had for years? When the hell did anyone in the Revolutionary War go, oh, if we let the British just keep taxing us without representation, if we let them keep, going around and doing whatever they want in the colonies, and shutting down the presses, and shutting down the tax offices, and shutting down the House of Burgesses, and shutting down any public demonstrations against their taxation, we'll eventually be fine. When in the world did anyone ever say that? When in the world did anyone ever say in the Civil War, oh, if we let the Confederacy split away, and we let them do what they want, and we don't try and reunite our country, maybe it will all just go away and it won't be our problem. Or when the Germans sank the Lusitania and killed 138 Americans in 1916, when in the world did we sit there and say, oh, well, if we let the Germans just keep killing Americans at sea, everything will go away and it'll be fine. Let's just sell out our own people. Hell, let's just, throw our kids on that ship next and let them get torpedoed by a U-boat. That'll be fine. When in the world in World War II did we go, oh, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, but their attack on Pearl Harbor and the deaths of 2,200 sailors was entirely justified because Japan is a strong and modern growing country, and they don't have the weaknesses that we have in America. We ought to let them control the whole Pacific. That's not our problem. Pacific is way over there, and it just happens to be that they had a little problem with us, picked a little fight of us. It's fine. There's only 2,200 Americans. There's only someone's sons and daughters that were dying down there in that harbor. But you can just wash that over and completely forget about the whole thing, or any other situation.
The crazy part is, it's not like we're asking NATO to do anything crazy or anything. We're not asking them to aggress on Russia. It's just a simple matter of defending NATO airspace. That's solely it. I see some people saying, this talk you're doing is sort of warmongering or things like that. It's not warmongering to say we should defend our airspace. Like that's not really warmongering. If we're willing to sacrifice our defense of our alliance and our airspace and our ground, that means we're not willing to actually uphold what the charter of NATO says, which is defend all the territories. So it's not like we're saying go invade Russia, send aircraft into Russia. It's nothing like that. But some people don't get it. Some people don't understand it.
Some people just don't get it at all. Like, some people will never get it because we're not the ones aggressing on them. They're in our airspace. If we shoot them down, where did we shoot them down? In our skies. They're not supposed to be there. Do people not get that? Like, some people don't get that at all. Some people will never understand that. If someone is breaking into your house and you end up having to defend yourself and they end up, passing on because of that, nobody's going to sit there and say you were the aggressor. I mean, hell, they're going to say, like, under American law, they would sit there and say you 100% had a right because of castle doctrine. You had a right to be able to be safe in your house and to defend yourself. That's the exact same situation with our alliance. When the Russians come into our skies, they're invading our airspace, and we have a right to our national defense and our sovereign collective defense as an alliance, just like Turkey did in 2015. And look how that turned out. That turned out pretty well for them and everyone. But with that, I hope that has addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Lil Donut, and Lil Donut puts in a $100 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. He said, apologies to the enforcers, not some of the nematodes in the chat. He said, if some of my comments are too political, not on a sign, but I like to call out the BS when I see it. And also, I saw Little Donut put in a second super chat down there, by the way. And also, a huge shout out to you, Little Donut, for the second support right there. The second one's a $50 support, so it's a combined total of $150. And we thank you very much, Little Donut, for that very generous support. Sadly, I can't read the second one off right here. That one does get too political, but I also understand the sentiment. While we can't read it off, I understand the sentiment where you're coming from. Because I'll be honest with you, it seems like NATO, and especially the United States, really doesn't know where it stands today when it comes to defending our alliance. At the same time, though, I do believe still down deep that the U.S. would come to NATO's aid if it was truly attacked by Russia in a really big way, like, for example, a ground invasion. The U.S. would still help and also honor the alliance, but it's just the confusion beforehand that really sends people into panic, including myself, honestly, sometimes. I'm kind of sort of panicked myself, thinking, is the U.S. really going to uphold our end of the bargain, or are we going to chicken out the last minute and run off? Because if we did that, that could cost the entire Western civilization if we did that. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I understand the whole calling out the BS thing. Sometimes we do that a little bit on the channel, and then some people get really offended and want to say that we're really political because we'll point out BS from anyone, and they don't also get that I can't point out the BS of the people who aren't in charge because they're not in charge yet again, and we did that for 3 years, and now it's someone else's turn. Some people don't get that, but I understand it to a degree because it's a crazy thing to see that we'll just back off these days and just let anyone have anything, and then we pretend like it's not an issue. Like the current president saying that it was a shame that we gave up Bagram and we kind of want that back when we more than happily gave that up back then to let some terrorists take over a country again. And now we're regretting that decision. We'll end up regretting this one in the future as well because it's the same kind of a weak response like we did then. Like like we're having to help out the Afghan government to be in a strategic location. Let's just all give up and leave. And then we did, and now we're regretting it. Like that was a bad idea generally all around, and that's kind of being found out now. That's why we're trying to get Bagram back. And then we'll sit there and go, let's just give up everything to the Russians or let them do whatever they want. And then later on, we'll all sit around and lament on that, and we'll all go, oh, that was a shame. That was a shame that we did that. And then everyone will just keep on arguing that we ought to give up more stuff. It never turned out well for anyone. Look at Britain. Britain went around with that kind of an idea of just giving up all kinds of stuff. Look at them now. I mean, they were a pretty powerful country. They were the United States of America at their time in terms of power projection. Now look at them. Like they're a great country, sure, but they're nowhere close to what they used to be. Or for that better example, look at any other country in the world that eventually whittled itself away down to anything and just said, nothing's worth fighting for, nothing's really worth defending, we ought to just start containing ourselves. Never turns out well for much of anyone. And look at everyone else in the world that people like to say are succeeding, like the Chinese. They don't have the idea of staying at home. Hell no, they don't have the idea of staying at home at all. They want to go invade Taiwan. They're going and building economic spheres down in the Indian Ocean right now to go actually have people to trade with like we do. They want what we have. And some people are just a little too blind to see that sometimes and to know that this is actually something worth fighting for. As far as most countries exist in the world, we are at the king of the hill right now and have been since 1991. Nobody's gotten close to doing what the United States and our alliance is doing, and we ought to be very appreciative of the kind of position that we are in the world, because if you take it for granted and you end up chipping it all away and selling it off wholesale to anyone else who wants it, like the Chinese or the Russians in the world, we'll end up like them. we'll end up like them, dirt poor, broke, with no hope and no futures whatsoever. And then everyone will be saying, going, oh, it was a shame. We used to be like the Rome of our age. Oh, it's terrible. And then it'll be too late. You can't get it back at that point. You already sold it all away, and there's really no way to climb back up to the top until some fool in one of their countries does the same thing. And that could be hundreds of years from now. Who knows? But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running, Little Donut, because it is folks like you with that massive support that help this channel to be possible and help us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
And that actually was the last one of the segment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like on God?
Yeah, like, yeah, like for real.
Dang, okay, we went through those in a flash, but beyond that, a big thanks to you once again for the support, and with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of our news for the night, as we have been able to hear that the People's Republic of China today said that we are at a crossroads. It's either peace or war. They're even seeing it, and they're the ones kind of supporting it a little bit, you know, with that whole attempting to invade Taiwan in a couple of years, and also trying to support the Russians in their little war. Looks like they're kind of helping that out a little, but even they're seeing that it's getting pretty close, and they're actually saying it. We also heard that Pakistan today has actually extended its nuclear protection as an umbrella to Saudi Arabia. It doesn't rain in Saudi Arabia, at least, you know, normally it's quite rare. But one thing that is raining down around Saudi Arabia are missiles by Israel and Iran and all the different folks like the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas that are pretty much all a part of Iran. Those rain down a good bit. And it seems that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have agreed that Iran's a problem. They signed a defensive pact about a day or two ago, and the Pakistanis just clarified today that this nuclear weapons protection umbrella extends to the Saudis. So it's making it incredibly clear that this is some sort of a nuclear protection against a possible nuclearized Iran that may be emerging here in the near future. So that way, if y'all don't know, because a lot of people always look at the Middle East, like there's some people who don't really know a lot about the Middle East to explain it this way, and they look at all the Islamic countries as like one unified alliance, which is not the case. Actually, a lot of these countries hate each other with a burning passion, and Saudi Arabia and Iran actually have a really bad running relationship with each other in foreign policy. Saudi Arabia hates Iran, and Iran hates Saudi Arabia. Iran hates Saudi Arabia because they call them a puppet of the United States, and also the majority sect of Islam inside of Saudi Arabia is different than Iran's. So Saudi Arabia's version of Sharia law is totally different than Iran's version of Sharia law. This is what happens when you get into religious theologies, is that they end up eating themselves apart, because then you have different sects of that same religion that end up going up against each other. So in the past, Iran has funded and supported terrorist groups that go at Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia funded and supported terrorist groups that went at Iran. And one of the more common ones that exists right now is the Yemeni Houthis, which actually do fire into Saudi Arabia from time to time, and then in response, the Saudi Arabians blast a couple of Houthis along the border and then call it a night. But that situation is one that's been not getting close to dying down at all. And as a matter of fact, with the new Saudi crown prince who's taken over the country, he's actually continued to get Saudi Arabia into an even more hostile position with Iran. And also on top of that, another thing is that if you ever look at Saudi Arabia, they actually have a very large military for the area. Like, let me go pull up the Saudi Arabian Air Force. Because a lot of people always wonder, why in the world do the Saudis have such a large air force for a country that doesn't really seem to have any threats? And it's because they do have a threat. It is the Iranians. They have 71 Eurofighter Typhoons. This is a Royal Saudi Eurofighter. Like, a lot of people have never even heard of this before, but the Saudis actually operate a lot of these. They also have 81 Panavia Tornadoes. They bought a lot of their weapons from the British. The British have a very big arms market with Oman and Saudi Arabia because of the whole, they were once kind of a part of the empire, now not, so they kind of lean towards British weaponry. And then they also have a nice whopping 211 F-15s. So crazily enough, Saudi Arabia's Air Force is actually larger, more powerful, and more capable, at least in numbers, than Israel's Air Force is, which is a little bit crazy to think about, but that's the truth of it. They also have 6 Boeing E-3 AWACS. So, I mean, quite a lot amount of air command and control abilities, at least for their country, and also 2 Saab 2000s, just to add to it. These are the 2000s variant of the AWACS. They also have 7 707 in-air refueling tankers, 7 KC-130 in-air refueling tankers, another 6 Airbus A330 Voyager in-air fueling tankers, and also 2 KC-130 Super Hercules in-air tankers. And then they have several transports. They have 33 C-130s, And then they have a decent amount of utility helicopters as well to support the Air Force's operations. So they're not exactly weak. And that's because of Iran, and they're fairly scared of what the Iranians might do to them if they were weak. So that is why we are seeing that the nuclear umbrella has now extended by Pakistan over Saudi Arabia to protect them from the Iranians as well. Moving on out of that news, we also were able to hear that the United States did confirm today that they have been in ongoing negotiations with the Taliban about regaining Bagram, or at least seeing a limited U.S. military presence inside of Bagram. That was then immediately retorted publicly by the Taliban, which then responded that at least the Taliban foreign minister, Zakir Jalal, stated on social media that based on, well, also, let me just read the full quote here so that way we can get it in its full context instead of trying to jump around. Taliban foreign minister spokesman Zakir Jalal said on social media that Kabul is open to dialogue with the United States based on mutual respect and common interests, but stressed it will not allow the restoration of a U.S. military presence. Pretty much meaning that the negotiations are going to go nowhere because, as many of y'all know, the Taliban don't really have a good running relationship with the U.S. military. The U.S. military used to shoot at them here and there while we were in Afghanistan, and for that reason, there's still a good amount of bad blood, enough that they don't want us back in their country. We also don't really have a good running relationship with the Taliban because they harbored Osama bin Laden after 9/11, and then when we invaded Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden hopped the border into Pakistan, and then he hid out there for a while until we got him in 2009. But beyond that, that's why we don't really have a good running relationship with the Taliban or anyone involved there. So I have a feeling that these negotiations to attempt to get back in Bagram are most likely going to go absolutely nowhere, and that ambition is going to die here and there. But outside of that, the Israelis are continuing their offensive inside of the Gaza Strip, as we were able to see more airstrikes around the Decried neighborhood inside of the area. So it does appear that the Israeli offensive is still going on inside of the Gaza Strip. Who would have thunk? We don't really get a lot of information out of that. The Israelis keep a very tight ship on information that comes out of Israel. So we don't really know exactly what's going on down there right now. But that's all of the information out of Central Asia and the Middle East that we have today. And that's going to be moving us on up and into the region of Europe. Again, we're going to be going through all of that news and also covering the U.S. Governmental updates that have come out today, as we also heard that there are going to be new restrictions on press coverage from the Pentagon. Pentagon reporters were told today that they must not gather or report any information, even unclassified, unless if it's explicitly approved for release by the government. So now every press group that is dealing with the Department of Defense or running any stories that have to pertain to the military, they have to have any story that is made on the military or covers the military. It has to be approved by the government. Otherwise, they're now going to be threatened with a revoking of their press credentials if they post a story that is not approved by the United States government.
Oh wow! Hopefully that gets challenged in court. That doesn't sound very free speech like right there. Also, by the way, if it is true that it says even unclassified information, I'm not sure that's going to hold up in court. That sounds like a violation of the First Amendment.
Yeah, so basically, folks, to actually put this out there to y'all, this is a little bit interesting. We technically would, if we had a press credential with the Pentagon, we would probably have that revoked right now, because we cover all kinds of stories about the U.S. military, like the ones down in Venezuela, that have to do with all kinds of unclassified, publicly sourced information, and none of it's approved by the government. You know, we don't run this by the Department of Defense every day to get approval. So technically, if we had a press pass with the Pentagon, we would have that revoked practically overnight. Just to let you know how that's kind of working right now. So a little bit interesting with that. And we also were able to hear that the United States, at the same time, is seeking congressional approval to sell around $6 billion in weapons to Israel. So that is an
$6 billion?
$6 billion, yes.
With a B?
Yes, with a B.
Huh, okay. $6 billion to Israel, and we just approved $800 million in some type of missile for Poland. Got it.
Well, I mean, we clearly just don't have enough money to spread around, like we're going broke. I mean, like, what do you think the government is, Matthew? An unlimited wallet? Like, I think you misheard that, Matthew. We're actually giving, a very sizable amount to everyone, but it's stretched thin, and we have to prioritize, like a major war with Russia, that's like little priorities there. Israel hitting some guys with some machine guns, now that's a really big priority. We need to get that lined up so that way we can make sure to help out where we need to. And also, we will completely revoke the support to Taiwan. I mean, they can definitely deal with the People's Republic of China on their own with what they have right now. They don't even need any money. I mean, we're really stretched thin, folks. It's not like we're building a $500 billion air defense system that'll be obsolete by the time it's introduced in service, or putting about, $500 billion into some sort of a AI system here in America, or anything for that matter. We're not doing none of that. I mean, that's chunk change, but a couple of billion to European defense. I mean, we're breaking the bank here, folks. Like, we can't do that one. So moving on out of that and on into Poland, we were also able to hear that a Airbus A330 Voyager of the Royal Air Force was conducting operations today as a part of the support of Operation Eastern Sentinel over the skies of Poland. And we also were able to hear further information from the Poles that they are now deploying a new air defense weapon. We're going to have to mute the audio, but this is the but this is the 12.7 millimeter WLKM multi-barreled machine gun for air defense.
This thing is pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. Also, you gotta applaud Poland. They got on that really quick. Like, this is their stopgap measure for drone defense on their borders, and this thing happened, like, within a couple of days, after they got done being attacked by those Russian drones, so that's pretty cool. Also, look at that. It can be hauled by trailer. Very nice.
It's really cool, actually. It's like an older air defense system, like a 20 millimeter Orlikon, that would be towed behind a truck, but this is all automated, which is incredibly cool.
Yeah, this thing's got some there's one of the little, sensors that goes with it, that can detect the drones coming in. It's got actually multiple sensor suites, that come with it, so there's another one right there. So very advanced, detection systems on this thing. It's old technology, minigun type deal, but, new detection. Look at that. They've got a joystick with it, so if you're familiar with the HOTAS, for the computer, you can just go ahead and operate this thing right off the bat.
Also, while we're watching this footage of them showing the air defense system in use, I saw someone say, "Oh yeah, all my retirement money, like the government's budget is their retirement. I don't know where they're getting their retirement from, but it's all supposed to go to Ukraine and Europe and so on and so forth." So let me ask you this, because this used to be the big argument: if we stop giving money to Europe and Ukraine, we'll finally end homelessness and world hunger and make the America a better place. Has that happened yet? Because I'm pretty sure that there is still no money going towards any of that, and we just stopped giving money to Ukraine and Europe. And in the meantime, homelessness and world hunger and everything still isn't being solved. So it seems like what I said for years about that sort of an argument came true, because we stopped giving them money, and for some reason I still see homeless people, and also things are still getting more expensive in this country, and everything else in between. So it doesn't really seem like that stood up well as a good argument. But anyways, moving on from that and out of Poland, from that really cool air defense system, it's now time for us to move into Russia, because we have to cover the curbside treatment. This is a whole new one, folks, that's been given out today to another Russian oligarch. One of Russia's top managers of the military-industrial complex, or the war industry, was found dead today. Alexander Tyunin, CEO of NPK Kimprom Engineering, a company tied to nuclear, aerospace, and defense products, got blasted today on the side of the street. Apparently, it was some kind of like a drive-by of a sort, from what we were able to hear, but he got the
Oh,
curbside
no.
treatment.
It was allegedly a self-inflicted issue, apparently, but I saw the video, though. It actually was a video on it, which was, a little bit gruesome, I will admit. It looks like, it was some type of situation. It wasn't a curb, so it was curbside, but it looked like he was standing next to his vehicle when whatever took place, happened. So, that's all I can really say about it without getting too graphic, but it was pretty bad.
It was not that great. You know, something else that was pretty gruesome today was what was coming out of Russia about the ongoing situation in the country. Russia has pretty much openly admitted that the country is going into a depression as there are massive fuel shortages nationwide and the fuel prices are rocketing for the remaining fuel left. It was so bad that Volodymyr Sololoviv, the devil, actually stated today that Russia is in pretty much a full-blown depression on his show, which is on Russia 1, which is the #1 news show in Russia. So they are openly admitting at this point, even the state-approved media networks like this guy's, that the Russian Federation is in a full-blown economic depression at this point. You know, actually, really quickly, I'll read y'all the subtitles on this clip and play it, so that y'all can hear what the devil had to say today about the ongoing economic situation. In this imagined reality, there are no two quarters. The word recession is a bad word. No, it's debatable, of course. Of course it's debatable, but talk to any business and they will tell you how they live today. It's really great, isn't it? Saying that sarcastically.
It's so great.
It's so great. Everything is just wonderful. And when they start laying people off, they'll say, "What do you want from me? Am I responsible for inflation?" Well, again, someone will probably run to complain about me once more. Oh, this guy's actually apparently getting complaints now. Like, he mentioned them. Man, he's getting what we get. Crazy. But you better come here.
He's getting snitched on.
Yeah, bro. They're reporting him. They're informing on him to the FSB. But you better come here and share your point of view. Welcome. I invite you every time, but I understand you're above that. Who are we? Really, why should the people understand anything?
Also, wait a minute. So he's inviting his adversaries who is complaining about what he's saying on the show, and they're refusing to come on.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, touche to them. Like, honestly, saying no to come on the devil's show right here. I don't think anybody wants to go on the devil's show, because if you say the one wrong word on this guy's show, I'm sure Putin will come for you, probably.
You know, I gotta be honest with you, man. I think Putin's coming for him before long, because he's getting incredibly critical these days. He's honestly, man, he's like going down the route of Igor Girkin, where he was like a blind ideologue for a long time, and then he became a massive opponent, and then he went to prison. I think he's on that same route at this point.
Yeah. Although he didn't really blame Putin or the Russian government, he kind of blamed the oligarchs, the way I understood it. It sounded like he was blaming the companies for the reason why inflation is there. It didn't sound like he was blaming the government. So I don't think Putin will go for him after that. And also, it's becoming impossible to ignore it. Like, the economic issues inside of Russia are becoming so bad, and so many people are talking about it on Russian social media, it's impossible to ignore it. So now it's about blame shifting. They're trying to shift the blame to the oligarchs, I guess. That's their new strategy in Russia, because they just can't outright say it's not happening, because literally everybody's seeing it.
I would have to agree, honestly. And also, moving on from that and on into Ukraine, into our location on... Well, actually, really quickly, before we move on to that, there's still a little bit more news in Russia. We were able to see that overnight, the Ukrainians did hit the Saratov refinery, and we got to take a little look at everything that went on, including the air defense. What the air defense doing? That...
Air defense siren just turned on, a little momentary one.
Bro, that was the car alarm. In the meantime, that refinery was smoking.
Короче, страданул, прям вон свеча горит. Блядь, ночью еще не видно ни хрена. Ну, короче.
Looks like a lava pit.
Полыхает, он, будь здоров. Опять, короче. О, опять.
You know, it looks like an active volcano.
О,
Yeah, it really does.
And then the orb. It's the orb of judgment.
It's the Mosul orb.
Сирены,
The
главное,
Russians be
нету,
claiming
а
that the
этим
top secret
стреляют
technology
они.
called the damage next. This guy needs to shut up. He's talking over me.
Bro, he's like yapping, bro. He loves to hear himself talk. Man, someone's about to come into the live chat and say that in a second, like this isn't a news show, and we're supposed to always be talking.
Она, главное, ночью горит, как елка, прям на Новый год, реально, вот НПЗ.
He's looking at the orb. He's very fascinated by it, and he's yapping about it. But we can also see another clip here of an impact, actually. Look at that, right there. Ba-boom. An impact on the Saratov refinery. What a shame, folks. What a shame. Another impact on another refinery, and they're already dealing with crippling fuel shortages. It just gets worse for them every day.
Вон падает. Я вижу, его летит. Вот летит, вон, видишь? Хуйня в небе летит. Во, ой, его видно прям.
Не вижу.
Вот он летит. Вот летит.
Вижу.
Он наверх ёбнулся.
Oh!
Oh, dear. Oh
That
my
was actually
God.
close. Like, okay, that reaction was deserved. That was actually close. I didn't really realize how close that was until it blew up. But yeah, the Saratov refinery is knocked out again for like the 9th time. And Russia also announced that they're going to be closing their airspace around the Astrakhan area, apparently to test out some kind of an IRBM, possibly, including an Oreshnik. They may actually be firing another Oreshnik at Ukraine as another attempted escalation, like they did last time, which was pretty much completely ignored by everyone, which was pretty wild because it was an IRBM that could have been nuclear armed, and it just happened to not be. But moving on out of the Russian news and on into occupied Crimea as a part of the Ukrainian front lines, we were able to see that the Russians are building a new air defense platform near to the area of Cape Tarkinkut, close to Olenivka. This little area is on the tip of the Crimean Peninsula, around right here. And you can actually kind of see where this air defense site would be. You can actually see the trails that the Russians have made around this area. And from what we can tell, this one is near a little patch of shrubs. So if you can find a patch of shrubs, you're in a good shape. You're in a good shape, very nice. Oh, and unfortunately, I won't be able to find it. But here's the Bowl of Love. We're not going to go and look at that. That sounds very questionable. But yeah, the Chasha Blovovi, or something along those lines. So, and also the point of no return.
Oh, look at that. Once you go there, you're stuck or something.
You know why they call this the point of no return, Matthew?
Why is that?
Because when the Russian CEO sees a tall, endless cliff like this, he knows that he's not going back to Russia. This is where his story ends, like on the side of this cliff. But anyways,
They wouldn't ever do it. They wouldn't do it here. It's got to be the window.
You know, I wouldn't know, Matthew, because this place has a nice name, Charming Harbor National Park. Now, this is a definite place the Russians would do a hit, because they always do hits like near like school playgrounds or like, a cafe or something like that, or a nice apartment. So considering that this thing is called Charming Harbor, I don't know. Like, they might actually pull one out here and, send someone off the cliff. Who knows?
They might do it here. There's no telling. Nobody's really sure, but they could.
Man, whip out that Lukashenko. Sound like you're constipated while you're talking, but moving on.
If you're not careful and you don't watch what you're saying closely, I will bring out Fluffy to have a word with you.
Fluff, fluff. Not Fluffy. Not Fluffy,
Man, I'll tell you
please.
what.
Man, Fluffy will whip out that straight razor on you. That thing was born in the streets of Babrusk. That thing knows business. Like, that thing knows business when they see it. They ain't playing. But moving into our location unknowns, we also were able to see one of Ukraine's new underwater drones, the Toloka, which is a pretty damn big drone. This thing's about the size of, I don't know, a small yacht. I really don't know what this thing's comparable to, but it's about 12 meters long, which is equivalent to about 36 feet, and 3 TLK-1000 variants were shown, ranging from 4 to 12 meters. The drones can travel, at least according to the Ukrainians, up to 2,000 kilometers, and carries a 5-ton payload. So there is 10,000 pounds of explosives in this thing. It is a blockbuster.
Well, it's like a basically an underwater nuke. Basically, this thing right here is a doozy.
Dude, 10,000 pounds is literally a blockbuster from World War II. Let me go pull up the British blockbuster bomb that was made to literally blast apart an entire city block. Here you go. Here it is, dude. They dropped some chef in front of this thing, and then there went the blockbuster right there.
Damn, that's not the blockbuster I'm familiar with. I remember we used to rent those back in the day, but they weren't renting them; they were like selling them, and it was permanent. You couldn't return it. Oh, look at that!
Happy Christmas, Hitler! Here's a 10,000-pound bomb for you. Honestly, I like that though. And also, look, they found one in the modern day in 2011 in the Rhine near Koblenz. There's one of them right there, unexploded. They sometimes didn't explode. It's been an issue these days in Germany, These things sometimes don't blow up. But still, quite a bomb, like one hell of a bomb. And the Ukrainians are going to be dropping this on the Russians somewhere. I can think of a couple of targets. Vostochny Rayon and Novorossiysk, Azov. Let's see, what else? The Kerch Bridge, that could be one. The port of Sevastopol, the port of Feodosia. In fact, this thing has a 2,000-kilometer range. You could actually get some miles out of this thing before you hit a target. This thing could really go anywhere. But here was the Toloka just sitting there in the field. They had it on public display for a little bit, but there are several variants of this: the Toloka 150, the Toloka 400, and the Toloka 1000. The Toloka 1000 being the big one right here. So moving on from that, we do want to ask you all about that little announcement that was made by the Russians about closing their airspace around the north part of Astrakhan near to Atabinsk, which generally suggests that a missile test is going to happen. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we did hear that Russia's declared an airspace closure starting in just a couple of days over Kapustin Yar ICBM test site, which is typically where they launch their Oreshnik IRBM missiles. And is Russia planning an Oreshnik test? And it looks like 66% said yes, a new IRBM test is coming soon from Russia, while 16% said no, Russia plans to strike Ukraine with it, and 8% said it might strike a NATO member, and 10% said nothing will happen, it's all good, no worries, bro. I would say personally, it does appear that some type of IRBM test is likely to occur, because usually when we hear of these airspace closures, especially near Kapustin Yar, which is their ICBM test site, usually it means that something is going to be launched of that nature. So I would doubt that it's some type of ruse or something like that. I would really doubt that. It probably is something like that. But we've only seen them launch an IRBM in Ukraine, I think it was like almost a year ago at this point. It was a long time ago. And there's really no indications they're going to strike Ukraine again at this point with it. There's really been no rumors in the back channels about that. So if they're planning on striking Ukraine, it would be out of the blue because we haven't seen any indication of it. So it's probably just a test. I'm with the 66%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's probably a test of another concrete destroyer, because we all know that Russian missiles do these sorts of things where they blow up concrete pads with a great deal of efficiency. And I have a feeling that it's going to be another IRBM test, and there's a decent chance it most likely will be a failure. A lot of them fail. Even the IRBMs, ICBMs, all variants fail. This was the most recent Sarmat test that we know of here, and it left behind a sizable crater. Let me see if I can show y'all a scale of the crater. Yeah, here we are. So this is a full-sized fire truck right there. You can hardly even see it, probably. On most screens, you probably can't because it's fairly small. And then that's the size of the crater. So if we're taking a guess that, say a fire truck in Russia would be about 40 feet long or so, this crater is at least several hundred feet across and probably about a good 150 feet deep. So it's quite a large crater that was made by this failure, and I'd assume that there's probably going to be another one of these that shows up down in Atabinsk. It will be lucky if it works, or whatever the hell it may be, but I would have a feeling that it's most likely just a test of something that they're about to be pulling off. Moving on back.
Oh, also, by the way, I just remembered, I forgot about this. The Russians were rumored to test the nuclear-powered cruise missile during Zapad. I haven't heard anything about them testing that so far. So I don't think you would launch that from Kapustin Yar. That would be a little bit weird because, like I mentioned, Kapustin is usually considered an ICBM and IRBM test site. So to launch a cruise missile from there, I'm not sure how that would work. But do you think it could be related to that? Because, like I said, I haven't really heard any indication that an IRBM test is imminent. I really haven't heard that. But obviously, when they close the airspace, that sort of seems to suggest that might happen. So what do you think the case is? Is it possible it's the nuclear cruise missile?
It's possible, but considering that cruise missiles have to get a little bit of range to make sure that they work, and you really can't fire those in an arc, I'd have a feeling they'd want to conduct that test in a more remote area.
Yeah, you would think so. And also, how do you launch a cruise missile from the test site? Like, is that even possible?
They could just mount it on like a static sled, for example, or a static launcher and fire it that way. That's definitely doable. But my question is, where in the world would it go? Because, the entire area is populated around here. It flies over the Volga, over Volgograd, or down towards Astrakhan, or into Kazakhstan, or it goes east and it starts flying towards Ukraine, and what if they lose control of it, and it just starts flying over NATO? It's like that. There could be a lot. Well, actually, that's something the Russians might actually want to pull off.
Yeah,
But
they might intend to do that, actually.
yeah, like after I said that, I was like, that's actually a plausible one. But I really wouldn't know where it would go from there because they're clearly going to try and get some distance on the thing, to make sure that it is working. And flying it over populated Russia, to wherever it's going to splash down, that seems like they could pose a great deal of risk, especially if the thing, breaks up in flight and there's radioactive debris over a populated city, or maybe an area that's trafficked by people a good bit. That could be an issue. So I don't really know if it would be that little cruise missile, but it might be another type of missile.
Yeah, and also, like, once again, there's always concern with the nuclear-powered cruise missile. Once again, I'm not totally clear about how that whole system works because obviously common sense would tell you a nuclear-powered cruise missile likely leaves behind some type of radioactive contamination as exhaust goes out the back of the missile, I would assume. So if they're launching that from Kapustin, they're liable to spread radioactive contamination over the entire flight path of the cruise missile. So that would be a little bit, now, once again, Putin doesn't really care about the civilians, but that would be going pretty far even for Putin to literally contaminate his own people with the radiation because it's going to be picked up. They're going to know it happened. So I don't know where they're planning to test that. I thought maybe they might actually test it in Belarus during the pod, but it looks like that's probably not going to happen, or at least if it's going to happen, it's going to happen really late.
Yeah, I just don't really know. I think it might be a different missile. But moving on from that and into the rest of our location unknowns, we also got to see these pretty cool pictures of a Dana SPG firing in Ukraine. Pretty neat. It was flying a Ukrainian flag. I was like, wow, that's cool. So just want to include that one. We also got the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours, which, oh my goodness!
Oh my God! They got 3 Bobcats for 3 MiG-31s going right into our airspace. We got 3 Bobcats in return. That settles the score. No need for NATO Article 4. No need for a NATO Article 5 because we settled the score today. They got 3 Bobcats. That settles it. Shut up, everybody. No need to do anything to Putin. Just calm your asses down and sit down. You obnoxious, stupid reporter, you. Shut up. But anyway, tell us more.
Oh, anyways, beyond that, the Russian casualty report was quite significant. MSD's keeper of the records stated that big troop loss versus the average. No tanks, nice collection of other equipment, but low losses. But we were able to see over the course of the past 24 hours, 1,150 Russian soldiers being wounded and killed, along with an APC, 44 supply trucks, 17 artillery pieces, 211 drones, 1 MLRS, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. It was a great day, folks. It was a great day, all things considered. Now, moving on through the very little amount of frontline news that we have, the frontline practically seemed dead today in terms of footage. We were able to see an ammunition depot getting hit inside the Luhansk Oblast right there.
Ooh. Oh.
Up to your mat.
This guy's filming with like some nice nods or something. He's like he's got night vision on it.
Honestly, it kind of is. We also got to see down near the Dobrapilya area that unfortunately the coal mines here that United 24 had actually made a video on a little while ago saying that they were incredibly close to the front but still operational. Due to recent Russian strikes on Dobrapilya and also near to the area of the mines, unfortunately the mines finally had to close and the mine workers have now evacuated the area and the mines are abandoned until the war is over. So a little bit unfortunate. We did get a video here showing the outside of these mines that are now abandoned. And have taken a decent amount of damage from nearby Russian airstrikes.
Also, by the way, folks, we do have a little bit of breaking news happening right this second. So not to interrupt the video here, but to report on our breaking news, just make it clear, this is breaking news coming out of Poland right now. We are hearing that according to reports that are coming out in real time, ground-based air defenses in Poland have been raised to their highest state of readiness. And we're getting some early reports that the operational command of the Polish armed forces are stating that the Polish and allied aircraft have been scrambled due to the activity of Russian long-range aviation that's currently taking or carrying out strikes against targets in western Ukraine. So there appears to be a perceived threat against Poland once again right now this very minute that we're hearing about. So that is going to evolve over the entire course of the rest of our stream because it looks like it's now 10:46 Central and we'll be on for another hour or so. So we'll probably be hearing something coming up here soon because I have a feeling that something might break out. So we'll keep an eye on it.
And we will keep an eye on that. And moving on down and into the area of the Enerhodar nuclear power plant, or as it's been called, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the International Atomic Energy Agency has adopted a resolution demanding Russia immediately withdraw from the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Backed by 62 members of the IAEA, the document reaffirms that all nuclear facilities must operate under full Ukrainian control and not under that of the Russian Federation and Rosatom, which has currently been operating the power plant since its occupation in the mid part of 2022. And so with that, folks, it's now time for us to move on up into Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy of Ukraine here on this very day of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Багато сьогодні речей були доповіді військових, головкома. Ми продовжуємо контрнаступальні дії на Донецькому напрямку, район Покровська, район Добропілля. Саме там був один з найбільш важливих для росіян напрямків їхнього наступу. І повноцінний наступ вони не змогли там розгорнути. Наші військові знищують їхні сили. Суттєві у росіян втрати. Суттєво поповнено і обмінний фонд для нашої держави. Кожен день додає російських полонених. Я хочу подякувати всім нашим підрозділам, які задіяні. 79-та, 82-га десантно-штурмова бригади, наші штурмові підрозділи, 1-й, 33-й, 225-й, 425-й штурмові полки, 14-та бригада Національної гвардії України. Дякую, воїни. І Куп'янськ, також райони навколо міста. Ми захищаємо позиції. Дякую всім бригадам. Будуть і нові наші діпстрайки у відповідь на те, що робить Росія. Провів сьогодні ставку. Головне – це виробництво нашої зброї. Є чіткі обсяги, що потрібно нашій армії до кінця року. Також, що потрібно на наступний рік і що має бути у нас на складах для захисту, для підтримки достатньої нашої сили. І, звісно, це і достатнє фінансування на виробництво зброї. Тут у нас в Україні виробництво разом з партнерами і постачання в Україну того, що виробляють партнери самі. Дефіцит у фінансуванні на виробництво зброї у нас буде покривати з цього року, в тому числі за рахунок керованого експорту деяких видів нашої зброї. Завдяки такому керованому експорту ми будемо збільшувати виробництво дронів для фронту, будемо мати фінанси, певні види зброї, і це сучасна зброя ми можемо виробляти у значно більших обсягах, ніж можемо самі профінансувати. А певні види зброї вже у нас значно в більшому обсязі, ніж реально потрібно нам сьогодні в Україні. Приклад – морські дрони, на які розраховує світ, і які у нас в профіциті. І також протитанкова зброя, деякі інші види. Тобто перший пріоритет – це фронт, забезпечення наших бригад. Другий пріоритет – наші українські арсенали. І тільки третій пріоритет – ось такий керований експорт. Протягом 2 тижнів буде представлений концепт. 3 нові експортні платформи. Перша платформа для експорту та взаємодії зі Сполученими Штатами Америки. Друга платформа – це наші європейські партнери. Третій напрямок – інші партнери в світі, які теж зацікавлені в українській зброї та від яких Україна отримала ту чи іншу підтримку. Це обов'язково, щоб вони нам теж допомагали, щоб ми їм допомагали. Зараз саме українці, саме українські компанії, українська армія мають один із найбільш сильних досвідів сучасної війни. Це стосується багато в чому передової зброї, передових технологій. Україна не буде займатися збройною благодійністю і допомагати тим, кому байдуже на Україну. Ми готові працювати з тими, хто підтримував нас реально, нашу незалежність. Звісно, має бути і надійний експортний контроль, щоб до українських технологій, до нашої зброї не дістались росіяни та їхні спільники. Багато про це говорили наші українські компанії, компанії-виробники зброї, багато інтересу в світі до спільних проєктів з Україною для виробництва зброї. Є і чіткий попит на нашу зброю. Відповідно, завдяки саме керованому експорту ми зможемо акумулювати гроші на більше виробництво тих речей, які потрібні нашій армії. Ще одне, що зміцнює армію. Дякую парламентарям за ухвалення мого законопроекту про військового омбудсмена. Це про реальний захист прав наших воїнів. Закон вже підписано і опубліковано. Сьогодні я підписав указ, щоб закон запрацював. Указ про створення Офісу військового омбудсмена. Затверджено також положення про роботу цієї інституції. І я призначу Ольгу Решетилову, людину, яку наші воїни добре знають, першим українським військовим омбудсменом. Попереду запуск інституції, системної роботи. Важливо, щоб на всіх рівнях у силах оборони України було це відчутно. Робимо те, що посилює армію, робимо те, що посилює воїнів в нашій армії. Дякую кожному, хто допомагає. Дякую всім, хто працює заради нашої України. Всім, хто воює заради нашої держави. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Героям слава!
And that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and we actually are going to be bringing you all to more breaking news at this moment. What do we got?
All right, so right now we are seeing some more breaking news. Once again, we have seen here an official statement from Poland, from their defense ministry, and they're saying this is the official statement. They said, due to the activity of the Russian Federation's long-range aviation, which is carrying out strikes on the territory of Ukraine, Polish and allied aviation has begun operating in Polish airspace, and they're taking all necessary procedures to ensure the safety of their airspace. So basically, in plain speak, that means the F-16s are in the air, they're on patrol, and there are possible interceptions underway. We're also hearing right now that a NATO tanker has taken off. It looks like an Airbus A330 tanker is now airborne, and it looks like it's currently over Poland toward the area of Lublin, which is where we've seen the previous Russian drone attacks take place in Polish territory. So we do have confirmed F-16s and NATO tankers in the sky. This could be a routine patrol, or maybe just ensuring the safety of the airspace, or there could be ongoing interceptions. Right now it's too early to tell, but it looks like something indeed is happening over Polish airspace right now at the very moment. But Enforcer, what say you?
This is a fairly interesting development. At the moment, we do not know a large amount, rather than NATO air forces in Poland are on high alert, and there does appear to be an ongoing air attack happening in Ukraine at the moment within the western part of the country. We will most likely not know any details or information about whether or not they are shooting down Russian drones that have breached Polish airspace until later. As usually the western states, including those in NATO, are usually a lot more tight-lipped with operational security, and if they are in the process of shooting down any sorts of aircraft, they'll most likely report that here within the coming hours, and not immediately at the moment at which it is happening. So we will have to wait and see if there is some sort of drone activity within the area or drone breaches into Poland, but at the moment I would be doubting it, because we have seen this sort of a high alert presence or state before with no drone incursions happening, and that was post drone incursion where the 24 Russian drones entered Poland originally. So I hope that does address that the best that we can, at least in our opinion, and we will be waiting to see if there's any other major news coming out about this development, along with any breaking news that we can cover here on air in the meantime. But for now, folks, while we are waiting for any additional news or information to come out of Poland about the ongoing situation, we will be making sure to get on into the rest of our questions and into the question segment at large, getting to address each and every single super chat that we've gotten over the course of the night, and hopefully as many live chats as we possibly can. And so, Matthew, in the meantime, while we're waiting for more breaking news to come out, please take it away.
All right. And by the way, I see several people requesting something. And of course, we oblige the audience here. We got to show them and give them what they want. Let's pull up Flight Radar 24 real quick, and let's get an active location on that NATO A330 tanker that's currently in the skies over Poland. If we could, let's get a live Flight Radar 24 view and see where that currently is.
Let's see here. I have to agree to let them sell my personal information to get on Flight Radar 24. Let's see.
That's just cookies, by the way.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So, like, I never seen it presented like that before. That sounded very ominous. So I was like, I don't know if I want to agree to that. But let's see here. It's
MMF 19.
MMF 19.
It was up there on the right. It was top tracked, second top tracked.
Oh, let's go take a look then. Oh, it's down here. This is actually the British A330 Voyager from earlier that we were talking about on air.
Yeah, it sure is. It looks like it is currently running a circuit. It looks like to the south of Lublin. So that is generally around the same area. It looks like it's running a circuit closest to the western, or excuse me, yeah, the western border of Ukraine right now. So closer to Lviv.
And it does look like it is conducting an orbit at the moment. The airspace down here has been cleared out almost completely. There are no flights in this area. And I'll be honest with y'all, this isn't really suggesting any air activity yet. If there was any air activity going on, this A330 would most likely move deeper into Poland, into the western part of the country, considering that it wouldn't want to be in an active combat zone. And on top of that, usually you don't want these aircraft around that sort of a deal anyways. It would be really hard to conduct in-air refueling ops, while at the same time people are firing missiles all around you at the air targets right below you. So generally, this is showing... What the hell's that?
My plaque
Oh,
psoriasis
yeah.
was so
Play off
bad.
this
so
real
We're
quick.
getting off of that. Like, I was like, what in the...
Yeah.
Bro, there was a whole clap track that came out. Like, I was like, are you playing that? Like, I thought you were doing the soundboard thing for a minute. I was like, what in the hell is going on? I was like, but anyways, beyond that, that is our soundboard. Like,
That is the soundboard.
that is definitely the soundboard. But it does appear that there is a high alert and most likely British Eurofighter Typhoons in the air at the moment, but we wouldn't really be able to confirm more than that based on the presence of that in-air refueling tanker. So Eurofighters are most likely airborne, but that's about all we can say at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can for now, and we will be waiting for more breaking news to come out here soon. And so with that, we are on into the questions. Matthew, please tell us what we got.
All right, so jumping into our first one here, we got to jump into this one, which goes to George. And George puts in a generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, George, for that support. And we do appreciate that very, very much. Now, just double checking here to make sure that George did not throw in a comment. And I don't think he did, but let me go back up here and check real quick. And it looks like there was no comment, but there was a super sticker. And thank you once again, George, for that Canadian support right there. We do appreciate that. And of course, what say you?
And we got to thank you massively, George, for helping this channel to keep it running, and a massive support, because it is folks like you who have made this channel possible, helped us to keep this thing running, and continue to help us to make this thing possible and keep it running. I got to thank you massively, George, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be on air every day. We wouldn't be able to cover all this news every day, and we wouldn't be able to put out the news the way people like to hear it. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
And our next one goes to Ralph Hernandez, and he puts in a 50 as well. And thank you very much, Ralph, for that $50 support, and also helping to keep the channel running, and we do appreciate that. He said, my first time, but I've been with the LSA since you started, and thanks for the news and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting for the first time. And we are happy to know that you've been here for a while with the Lee Spring Army, and we're happy to know that you're still here to this day and find it to be of salt enough that you support the channel and help it to keep on running. And I got to thank you massively for that, Ralph Hernandez, because I know that you've been in the chat for a while, and we are always massively appreciative of you being here and your support tonight in helping us to continue to cover this kind of news. So huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, we're going to be moving on into the next one.
Also, by the way, folks, I want to take a second to announce to y'all that there is a new Enforcer Matt video special that will be coming out in about a couple of months. And I know it's a long time to wait, but there is a move that we're undertaking in the meantime. But at the same time, though, I wanted to go ahead and start production on a new special video that we're going to be coming out with. And to tell you all the video topic, it's going to be about Russian psychological operations, active operations currently ongoing in America. And right now, I'm still doing the research for it. I'm trying to go and get some confirmed sources and also reliable sources to report to y'all exactly what takes place every single day, to show y'all what those operations look like, and also how they've historically been done, and also show you the psychological research behind it as well, and why they take a hold over the American mind in the modern day so much. So very excited to show you all that one when it comes out. Currently working on the script right now and all the research, and my goal is I want to have a CIA psychologist on the video. I also want to have a couple of other intelligence specialists sort of add their input into it, because I want to get the full picture from people that actually do psychological operations on other foreign countries. Now, obviously, I can't get a Russian psychological operator on here because that's the enemy, but I can get our people on here, or at least the United States people. I can get those people on here. So maybe they'll come on, maybe they'll be on camera, but at least they'll be able to give me their input on the script as well, about what it's good about, what's not good about it, and maybe add some input to it. So that is an upcoming project right there. But Enforcer, are you looking forward to that project? How do you feel about it?
Oh, hell yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Why wouldn't I? I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. I unfortunately, at the moment, folks, I actually don't have any video projects or ideas that I'm coming with. I'm just still trying to battle to make this map. Which is its own thing for me. This is kind of like the project I've been working on for a bit, and this has taken a long time, folks. It's taken a lot of research and study, and I've hit a roadblock with the Russians, and I'm wondering if I should just start moving back to mapping out NATO countries and what they do, because Russia is very confused and really stupid. So it's really hard to put them on a map. So I hope that addresses that well, at least in my opinion. But I think that video is going to be absolutely incredible and very interesting. Hopefully, it'll do quite well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than, get this one goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that $50 support right there. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Marion said, what the hell? And also, by the way, Marion was saying that because apparently it wouldn't let her put the like proper text in the box. So YouTube has gotten really strict with what they allow in super chats. I'm not sure why that is, because they'll let certain things in the live chat, but they won't let certain things in the super chat. I wish we had control over that, because honestly, it seems like a bit of a constraint to the super chat, especially considering that you're paying for a comment. It seems like it would be less constrictive, but it's not. So sorry about that, Marion. I wish we could control it, but we do appreciate that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you massively for support, Marion Deemer, and helping this channel to keep running. And I gotta say, I hate to know that YouTube's getting pretty heavy on the censors on what can be put in a super chat. It's an unfortunate thing to hear about, but I do thank you so much for still wanting to support this channel nonetheless, and helping us to keep this thing rolling, because you help us to stay on air and to continue to cover this news one way or another, and we would never have been able to do that without support like yours. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and I'm hoping that did address that the best that we ever have could have. I hope. And so with that, it's time for us to get on and into the next one.
And our next one goes to Espen Turgenhagen, who puts in a 500 Norwegian kroner. That's a NOK. 500 NOK. And thank you very much, Espen, for that very generous support right there. And he said, hello there, and take one for the chat in LSA.
Hey, and hello to you, Espen Turgenhausen. Or Turnshagen. Yeah, it's Espen Turnshagen. We've been getting the name wrong. like I just read it, and we're getting it wrong. It's Espen Turnshagen. But I thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling. All the way from the nation of Norway, which has really cool cities in it, like Narvik and Harstad and Trondheim and the other ones that I really can't pronounce, and Bergen and Oslo, the most famous of them all, Oslo. You know, I wonder what these mountains look like. Are there roads? Yes, there are roads in these mountains. Let's take a little look. Oh, wow, this kind of looks like the Appalachians.
Yeah, it kind of does a little bit. It's very scenic looking.
I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, if you come up here and you heard someone say, "Hey, boy, what you doing up here?" I wouldn't be surprised. This really does look a lot like the Appalachians. Really, it's really crazy with that. Like, I didn't expect that, but it's nice. It looks really nice, but I just didn't expect it to look like the Appalachians. Let's see. What about this little park here? Yes, the glaciers and the lakes. Everyone loves to take pictures of the lakes and the waterfalls and the mountains. They are really picturesque. These do not look like the Appalachians. Well, it kind of does, but the ones up in Maine, which are pretty different, but still really cool place.
I remember growing up in the Appalachians.
I remember growing up in the Appalachians. Oddly enough, it was flat. Weirdly enough. It was,
man, you know what's crazy is I grew up in the desert, which is the Appalachians.
You know what's crazy, folks, is that I grew up in the Appalachians and then I went to Harvard. That makes no sense. that makes no damn sense.
Why does that make no sense?
Well, because, Matthew, do you think that anyone who would live in the Appalachians, us included, because technically we actually did according to the parameters of where the Appalachians are, would we go to Harvard? No. Who in the world in the
Appalachians? If you have the right connections.
Who in the world in the Appalachian Mountains is going to have those kind of connections? Nobody does. Like nobody at all that I know.
Somebody did.
Well, they didn't grow up in the Appalachians. They grew up.
He grew up there in spirit, though.
They grew up there in the plains of Ohio. It's totally different country. Totally different country. You know, it's, something's amiss, folks. That's like saying I grew up in the plains of Wyoming, and then you go to like Yale or something. You know, it's like, how the hell does that work? You know, I don't really know, and I have a lot of questions about that. That's kind of like how the last president was a great speech maker. It's just that, you know, a lot of his speeches, at least historically, ended up being mostly someone else's, and he just like kind of like takes some stuff out and put it in his, you know, that kind of a deal. It's kind of similar to that. You know, it's kind of like folks, politicians don't really represent the true story a great deal, you know, about what's up or who they are or anything, you know, like kind of across the board. But, you know, just
really, you have to define what even truth is in the first place before you start getting too crazy.
What do you mean connections? What do you mean? What do you mean connections?
Well,
We have
first,
to talk.
we must define what the meaning of life even is in the first place before we get into all this complicated conjecture.
Look, I think politicians lie. What's a politician? Like, it's just some shit like that. Like, it would be something like that. Oh my god. Oh man, dude. Honestly, man, don't even get me started on that guy. You can sit there and be like, well, you know, a politician is a lawmaker. What's a lawmaker? What are laws? It's like, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean?
What is the meaning of this nebulous conjecture that we're engaging in right now through speech and voices and sounds? Like, what is the meaning of this?
But you have to talk about what's going on in China. What the like? I can't even say that one on
We're
air.
not bringing up nothing about that. No.
We can't bring that one up on air. That was a rough one. But you know, he ended up having a way of disappearing. You know, after that whole. Who said I'm a Christian? Like, it's like, well, the show said you were, and you kind of showed up under that premise. So a little bit weird that you asked that question.
I think we ought to make that guy an honorary lawyer. Like, honestly, like that guy's like giving me flashbacks to law school, like the way they were talking about. Well, first of all, we got to define what it means to go. I'm like, oh god, I'm like, what the hell are we getting into here? Like Twilight Zone or something? But honestly, that guy was doing it in everyday conversation.
What even is property? It's like, you know, it's property. It's like, you don't need anything deeper than that. It's something you possess. What is intellectual property? It's like, well, that's intellectual property. It's intellectual ideas that you personally own. Intellectual property. Don't need to get farther into that than that. Like, it's like, that's not really deep. But you know, Matthew, it would be great to sit there and honestly debate someone like that on Ukraine, because you'd be like, you know, the Ukrainians are worth supporting. What is Ukraine? Who are those people? Like, it's like, oh my god. It's like, honestly, man, any conversation with that guy, it literally just breaks down into what is anything. Like, it isn't even a debate on the substance of the matter. They're literally just sitting there running in circles, having to explain the textbook definition of every concept. It never gets farther than that. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that well, at least the best that we can. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible, help us to keep it rolling. And I got to thank you greatly for that, because, you know, not a lot of folks have to support the channel or do for that matter. It's entirely the viewers themselves that make this channel possible, and folks like you who throw in some support. You help us to keep our lights on and pay the bills back here and keep this thing rolling and alive. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, let's see, Frostbit Jenna said, we don't need any more attorneys. I was just emailing for a case and sent opposing counsel the facts, and the attorney accused me of defamation for telling her what the client did. Oh my god, like I've heard so many things like that. Like, I don't know what it is with attorneys these days. They are like hostile as hell. Like, when it comes to like representing their clients, it's like there's one thing, there's like aggressive representation, and then there's also just being an asshole to the other side. It's like, you know, you don't have to be an asshole to the opposing counsel. You can still represent your client without, you know, going overboard. But yeah, I've seen that stuff, Jenna. Interesting to know it just doesn't happen just in Alabama. It happens elsewhere too. Kind of interesting with that. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Trism666, and thank you very much, Trism, for that massive $100 support right there, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Trism said, so is the plan starting to fly CAP now as part of their readiness, out of town watching from phone, so not sure why app ate a penny, and keep up the great work in LSA.
The app ate a penny. it's a penny. You know, they're saying that they're going to get rid of pennies now because it costs more to make a penny than a penny's worth. Which I don't know. You know, it's like, you know, shouldn't we make them anyways? Because I don't really like the idea of making people have to round up or down. Because, you know, they're always going to round up, you know. That's how it's going to work. And I'm going to lose a penny. But beyond that, I would say... Are you talking about the CAPs in the Civil Air Patrol? Like the one in America that flies the Cessnas around? That would be my question, Trism. But, out of town. So is plans. I mean, I guess, like, at least for Estonia, that's about all they have. It's like a kind of a Civil Air Patrol sort of deal. So maybe. But generally, I would say that the best sort of a move would be for NATO to pretty much project an air shield over the Baltics and shoot anything down that tries to come our way. That's what I would think. But I do thank you for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. Also, Poland. You said Poland. Oh, I see. Not the Baltics, Poland. Combat. Oh, you mean combat air patrols? Sorry, I for some reason I reverted to civil air patrol, which is this thing in America. But I would say I suppose that's going to be the standard at this point inside of Poland, is that they are going to fly combat air patrols whenever there appears to be a potential for an air breach of their airspace. I think that's most likely what it's going to end up becoming here in the future. Because if we don't hear of any drone incursions, and yet this was the kind of response, this seems that this is going to end up becoming the norm for the Poles, just to make sure that if anything is going across the border, they're already ready and primed to shoot them down. So a massive thanks to you so much for the support, Chosen666, and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And thank you so much for allowing us to keep up the good work, because your support is definitely helping us to be able to do that. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I see people asking for an update about the situation in Poland. We've gotten no new information about any type of interceptions, but the F-16s are apparently still airborne, and also that NATO tanker, which is doing a circuit right near the western border with Ukraine. It looks like it is currently still doing that circuit. It's still on it. So it's still airborne, it's still operational. And just if you want to track it on flight radar, it's MMF-19. I guess that's Money Market Fund 19, I guess. Getting all economic on us up in here, trying to make some money while they're flying around. But all jokes aside, though, I don't have any new information about it, so I'm guessing it'll be probably an hour longer before we hear something, but I'll be fascinated to see what is going on with that. It could be maybe a patrol, we're just not sure. But jumping into our next one here, this one is going to go to none other than, while I scroll back up, this one goes to LSA Rocks, who puts in a 50, and thank you very much, LSA Rocks, for that support. We do appreciate that. And also, good luck with the new channel, by the way. And he said, who really uses the MiGs anymore?
Only really the Russian. Well, actually, a lot of people use MiGs, but it's not the MiG-31s or the MiG-25s. It's really the MiG-29s, which actually are used in a decent amount of countries around the world. Let me show you the list of current operators. I wouldn't know all of them off the top of my head, so I have to scroll down this insanely long article to be able to find. Here we go. Here are the current list of users and the former users. Germany actually used to have some. Well, it was East Germany, and then when they united, the Federal Republic of Germany actually operated them for a little bit. Czechoslovakia used to operate them. Hungary, Romania, and Moldova also used to operate them, along with Kazakhstan, Iraq, Syria, Israel, interestingly enough, along with Chad, and also Indonesia. So there was actually a decent amount of former users, and current users are as follows. The United States of America, Bolivia, let's see, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, Yemen, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Bulgaria, Serbia, Poland, Belarus, Russia, Mongolia, India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, formerly Burma. But there's actually a lot of people who use them, and some people are like, America has them? And we do. We do have some MiGs. Let me see if I can show y'all. Here we are, used by private defense contractor Raven Aerospace for adversary training services. So pretty much an adversary unit for the Air Force and Navy to train against.
That's so interesting.
That's pretty cool. I actually didn't know about this group. Let's see. American Air Defense Contractor out of Houston. And their whole thing is just pretty much subcontracting as a part of the Department of Defense. So pretty interesting with that. But that is actually the list of people who have MiGs. It's quite a large number of them, really. So a lot of people do use MiGs, but are they good? Hell no, they're absolutely not good at all. Most of them are aging, most of them are old, and none of them have any competent computer or electronic systems inside of them. And anyone who knows anything about the late Soviet Union would know that that's the one category that they had completely fallen behind on so far that they abandoned everything involving computer and electronics because there was no way for them to compete anymore or even be viable in the modern world. So they just started buying IBMs and tried to make up the gap that way. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, it looks like we have a bit of a change here with the NATO tanker. It looks like the tanker is now heading south. It's had a course deviation. It looks like it is no longer following the circuit. So it looks like it is heading further down toward Lviv, maybe it looks like, toward that part of the Ukrainian border, based on what I'm reading right here. So it has had a deviation. So that might tell us a little bit of something there, at least a little hint of what's going on. So maybe it's got some support role going on down that area. But moving on to our next one, this one is going to go to Celix the Fat, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Celix, for that support.
Hey!
And they said, well, that is the question that keeps burning in me. When? And when are we going to come to the conclusion that there is no appeasing Russia?
I don't really know when. It kills me inside, though, really, to see the kind of reaction that we have these days. It's a real shame, and it's also really a shame to see that people are so weak-minded in the West. Like some people have completely bought into this idea that being a coward is the best way to go on everything. Like you won't see anyone actually having a spine these days on anything at all. Like if someone gets in a fight in America, they're punching someone in the back of the head when they're looking away. When people sit there and have a problem, they take a coward's action. Whenever there's a problem with another country, we just want to act like we don't want to have any trouble to the point we'll let people run over us. It's just so on and so forth. It's a real shame, honestly. And I'll have to be honest with y'all. I think the blame for that generally falls on the country itself for that sort of a mindset, or really the Western world for that matter, because the Western world does not emphasize any kind of strength at all, and generally tries to portray in any sort of media that weakness is strength, which makes no sense. Like every single war movie that comes out is an anti-war movie. War is hell. It's like, yes, but there is a purpose to them. And that's something that I think is so stupid. People act like wars never have a purpose, like ever. It's like, yeah, they do. It's like, yeah, it's like what war has not had a purpose? Like every single war has had a larger purpose to them. Whether you agree with that purpose or not is up to question. But acting like wars are pointless and we just send people around the world to go die in some place just for the hell of it, that doesn't really make any sense at all. And the people who believe that are just, they don't have enough of an ability to get nuanced enough to know why in the world those sorts of things go on. But if Russia invades Europe, we are at war to defend our alliance and our interests, which some people also don't get because it's too abstract of a concept. It's a crazy sort of a thing with that. But I don't know when will be enough, because it seems like these days nothing is enough. People can just stomp on you all day long, and people just go along with it because they're just too scared to stand up and say that they've had enough. That's how it is. And then someone says, until you fight in one. Look, I'm not saying that war is fun, but wars have to happen sometimes. Like, that's just the truth of it. Like, when a country attacks you, you might have to end up going to war. It's not fun. It's not great. It's scary. It's terrifying. You might end up dying in it. I might end up dying in it. Anyone could end up dying in it. But sometimes that's what you have to do. The world is not a great place. The world is not always going to be a fun place, and everything that you do isn't always going to be great. Some things are going to be traumatic. Some things are going to stick with you for the rest of your life. Sometimes you have a choice in what those things are. Sometimes you don't have a choice in what those things are. And in this sort of an instance, you really don't have a choice. If it happens, it happens. But that's what a lot of people just don't really get. Like, I'm not of the idea that wars are fun. Wars are a picnic. Wars are hell. We watch them every day on this channel. We watch people get obliterated. We watch all kinds of incredibly horrendous things that if we even mention them, YouTube would have an issue with us describing them. And I know what war is because I've been having to watch them the entire time that I've been around here on this channel, along with Matthew for 3.5 years doing this every day. But sometimes you have to fight them. Like, what alternative is there to war in Ukraine rather than the Ukrainians just giving up? There's none. So if they give up, they avoid a war, but then what do they get after that? They end up becoming second-class citizens in their own land. They end up getting tortured, genocided by the Russians. All sorts of horrendous things will happen to them. Look what they do to the Ukrainians that are in occupied territories right now. If they give up, that happens to everyone in Ukraine. They have a reason to fight. The Russians, at least in their opinion, have a reason to fight because they're expanding their sphere of influence. But that's not our sphere of influence, so we're not for that. And we're never going to understand that because we're not Russians. America has a reason to go and fight China if they try and invade Taiwan, or to fight China over really any other matter. They are an enemy sphere of influence. So if they ever want to face us down and not find a way to negotiate themselves out of a situation, the result is war. That's what it is. Like, I know a lot of people like to have this idea that we could just avoid wars and kumbaya and hold hands and sing songs and eat little picnics, but the world isn't like that. Never has been like that, never will be. And this is the kind of world that we live in, and you just have to recognize that, it's not always going to be a cakewalk. Like, that's just the truth of it. And if you like to pretend like that, you're lying to yourself and you're living in a false reality. And you're just kidding yourself into getting curb stomped one day. Look at everyone in after World War I who wanted to hang on to that kind of an idea, and then look at what they created. They created the deadliest war in human history from that kind of cowardice, because they said, "Oh, son, you wouldn't know about facing down the Germans. I faced them down in World War I in the trenches at the Somme, and we ought to avoid that at all costs." And then look what they did. They got every single one of their kids involved in the Second World War, and then more people died in that war than the first one because they were scared to fight a second one. If we had fought the Germans in the late 1930s, World War II wouldn't have even happened, at least in Europe. It would have been a footnote. It would have been called the Allied Intervention in Germany. And it would have ended. The Soviet Union would have never gotten into the era of the Cold War in the way that they did, because they would have never been able to take over most of Eastern Europe, because World War II would have never happened for them to take control of those areas. Germany would have never ended up being extremely fascist. It would have pretty much died off in its earliest years. The Western world would have never known the Second World War. It would have been just a little footnote of military intervention in Europe, and that would have been it. And that's if people had a spine. But no, people didn't have a spine, so they let Germany do what they wanted. They let the Germans build up all of their arms and equipment and weapons and continue to push their ideology to the absolute extreme, so that way they could go around invading everyone in Europe and then make it everyone's problem. It's an interesting sort of a thing. It's really interesting, like how people will argue against it, and there's clear historical examples to prove them wrong. And and there will be terrible things that will happen. Like, for example, let's say the Russians occupy the Baltics for a while. Let's say the war goes on for a little longer of a time. And because the Russians think that the Russian people are superior, they start to put the citizens of the Baltics in camps. And then we start to go through that area and liberate them, or we end up getting some sort of negotiated settlement where the Russians just withdraw, and then we go up there and see the remains of those camps. We go, "Oh my God, how could we have not seen this coming?" And at that point, the people who would be asking that question would be just too damn stupid to even answer the question to, because anyone in their right mind could have seen it coming from a country that's extremely aggressive, expansionist, imperialist for the large part. And not only that, they have some sort of a concept that their people in their country are some sort of a superior race to everyone else. It's going to result in that very same thing that we saw in World War II, and then a whole bunch of people are going to be too stupid or blind to see it coming. It's a shame. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I'd have to agree to. When is going to be enough? And at this point, I have no clue. But a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, an update on the situation in Poland right now. It appears to be MMF-19, which is the NATO tanker in the air. It appears to be it's on its return to base right now. It looks like it's re-entering commercial traffic, which is currently being held back away from the area where the drone attack was taking place. It looks like the tanker is re-entering with commercial traffic. So it looks like it's heading back to Germany, where it originally took off from. So that would seem to suggest that maybe there's no need for the refueling tanker anymore, which might suggest the threat could be over at this point. So that is what I'm seeing right now, but we are waiting on confirmation to see if the threat actually is over. It could be simply the tanker is leaving early, but I would seem to believe that it's probably the threat is over. But moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Frostbit Jenna Tolls, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Frostbit, for that support. They said, Chris's mom poses no threat to Earth and will remain far away. And the closest she will approach our planet is about 170 million miles. And Chris's mom will reach her closest point to the sun around October 30th, 2025. LSA.
Thank the Lord. That's a good thing to hear. Frozen Jenna last name Tolls. And I got to thank you so much for the support. I also changed your name. That was a pretty funny name change right there. And I also got to say that was a pretty good one. I thank you so much for the support once again and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Celix the Fat yet again, who puts in another $50 support. And thank you very much, Celix, as well, for that second support of the night. And he said, and this one is just pure support, 100% pure support, and pure salad fund for appreciation for the work.
And I thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the salad fund. I really need to get some salads. We eat really unhealthy around here, I think, me and Matthew do. So we really do need some salads from time to time, honestly. It'd be a nice improvement. But still, a massive thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for the pure 100 support, because it helps us to keep this thing 100, bussin' on God. No cap. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to, also by the way, I see Bruce Lee saying the tanker might have to return to base to refuel. That's a long way to go to refuel the tanker. So unless this threat's going to go on for multiple more hours, then I imagine it's returning to base, probably to back to station. I'd imagine, not to return back to Poland. I would imagine, but it's possible that maybe it's returning. But that's a long flight to bring fuel back. So I have a feeling it might be over. The threat is, but we'll have to wait and see. But our next one here goes to Bobby43, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Bobby, for the second support of the night. We do appreciate that. He said, borders are drawn in blood.
That's true. Borders are drawn in blood. All of them are drawn in blood. And that's another funny one, Bobby. Like, a lot of people have this really silly notion, and this is one that I find so funny. So many people in the mine world have this silly notion that borders are only misdrawn or misshapen in places like the Middle East because of European influence, or Africa, or elsewhere. But if you look at Europe, Europe's borders are really odd and dysfunctioned really as well, at least as far as like the history goes behind them. Like, Germany got cut by a third after World War II, and most of what's modern day Poland isn't even Poland, it's Germany, and most of what's modern day Lithuania, Western Belarus, and Western Ukraine is Polish, and yet it's not. It's these other countries. And for that example, for that matter, Kaliningrad's German, never was Russian, never was really even Polish or Lithuanian. It's pretty much always been German, yet it's Russian. With France has loads of countries that used to make up different areas, like Brittany, Burgundy, and so on, and they're all a part of France now, and they don't even view people as Burgundies or Britannic peoples of the Britannic Peninsula. They look at them as French. And then the Italians are a whole other thing, along with the Spanish and so on and so forth. Like, it's an endless sort of a deal. And people don't really see that those borders end up these ways because they were drawn in blood. And nowadays, we like to have the concept that a nation's borders are a nation's borders. It's the first time ever in history that that's ever been the case, that we try to make sure that borders really don't change or bend just off of might making it right. And so I would have to definitely agree with you with that, Bobby43, and it's something that loads of people just don't really know and get. And as far as Ukraine's borders these days, Ukraine's borders are being drawn in blood at this point, and hopefully they'll be able to get back everything that they had from 1991 that was just peacefully given to them when they exited the Soviet Union. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, also, I see some people saying, "Oh, Europe is in straits right now. There's loads of protests." There's always loads of protests. Like, it's an endless amount of protests. There's protests all the time in America. Protests mean nothing about the condition of a country, really, especially in a Western nation, because at least, like, to be honest with y'all, protests just generally show that a freedom of expression exists in the country. It's honestly better to have protests than none. Because if there is a complete lack of protests, clearly not everyone's happy in the country, but something's stopping them from protesting, so what is it? And then that's a more sinister answer than the kind of protests that were going on themselves. So that's what I would say. And also on top of that, there's always endless protests. Like before and during World War I, and before and during and after World War II, there were loads of protests and strikes and all sorts of deals. But it never really meant that a country was completely collapsing or falling apart. And I think a lot of people don't really get that a lot anymore, is that civil dissent in the form of protest doesn't mean that a country is falling apart or that's descended into chaos. Now, if it turns into a riot, at least that city has descended into a state of chaos. But if it's just a legal protest and people are out there voicing their minds and marching around and stuff, that they have a right to do that. And honestly, I think it's more of a sign of a healthy democracy than it is a failing of our nation, or any nations in Europe for that matter. Because I see some people saying, "Oh, Europe is just all tied up in protests. They're falling apart." And no, it's like, honestly, I would say that China is more so falling apart because there are no protests in China None. That doesn't mean that the people in China are happy. That means that the government shuts them down and oppresses them to the point that they can't speak out and they can't protest and they don't even have a right to say that they aren't happy with what their government is doing. Think about it, folks. Like people sit there and say nowadays, oh, these people out there in the streets, they're protesting and stuff. It's like I really don't know why in the world people have an issue with that, because it's like, doesn't everyone? I mean, like, weren't a lot of people against the last administration and out in the streets protesting? Yes. Or are a lot of people against the current administration out in the streets protesting? Yes. That generally is a good sign. But anyways, Matthew, what do we got for news?
All right, so it looks like the threat most likely is over. I would give it a 75% chance that the threat's currently over in Poland. There's currently a Ryanair flight busting, going through the airspace. Pause. But there's currently a Ryanair flight going through the area of the airspace where the tanker was currently on the circuit. So we're also seeing an LOT flight also in the same airspace. So it looks like most likely, and take this with a grain of salt, this is based on my current assumption on flight radar, it looks like the airspace has been reopened, at least preliminarily. So we're seeing commercial flights return to the area, and the tanker is still en route back to its home base. So it looks like it's probably over here. But pause. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, that Ryanair be busting on him. Like, it's a man.
I was about to say busting through the airspace, but I took too long of a pause, and it came out really bad. I should have just continued with it, but
Man, that Ryanair be busting. I gotta say, that's good to hear, and it's good to know that at least for now we haven't heard that Polish airspace was violated. So I hope that does address that well. And also, someone else said, this is something interesting. Someone said, as far as protests and pretending mobs breaking the law, attacking and burning things is a protest are very different things. Well, here's my thing on that. Almost all of them turn into that, and then it turns into a riot, which riots are unlawful. Protests are lawful, riots are unlawful. But here's the thing: there's a process for that, and if y'all don't know, riots have been going on in this country forever, and they go on everywhere in most normal Western societies for ages. There's always been a riot somewhere where buildings are getting burned down or people are getting beat up or maimed or even worse, killed in the streets. They always go on. Like if you think that that's something new in this country, let me school you. That's been going on literally since the founding of the country in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris, and even before that, for that matter, which is what led to the American Revolution. There were always don't y'all know? Like, this is something that's crazy to me. People act like riots are new to this country. Isn't one of the biggest stories of the lead up to the American Revolution the Boston Tea Party, which was a riot? Literally a whole bunch of guys covered in feathers trying to make themselves look like American Indians ran onto some boats in the harbor in Boston, literally overpowered armed guards and beat them and forced them to go running away, and then caused billions of dollars in property damage. And that's one of the most influential stories of what led to the Revolutionary War, was a riot. I don't really know if a lot of people get that, but that's a fairly normal kind of thing. Unlawful, sure, but fairly normal, and there's no reason to act like that's a reason or a justification or excuse to say that a country is falling apart, because a democracy always has some sort of angst or some sort of tension like that that's boiling up from under the surface, always. It's fine if it's a protest, unlawful if it's a riot. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Patrick Chapdelaine, and thank you very much, Patrick, for that $30 support right there. He said, when do NATO will stop waiting and start to react to all these provocations?
I don't even know at this point. I'd have to declare ignorance on it, because you would think that it would have been by now, and we continue to just take it. So I can't even hide my frustration and disappointment at this point. It's cowardice to the umpteenth degree. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $23 support from Ed. And thank you very much, Ed, for that $23 support. He said, hello, LSA, Irish Ed here. And my question is, how much has the USA spent inflation adjusted during the Cold War? And we don't want to put it in the last few pennies. It makes no sense to me. And best channel on the internet.
Let's see. In the Cold War, how much did the U.S. spend during the Cold War on the military? So we spent... Let's see. Throughout the whole Cold War in 1996 dollars, so this is going to be massively inflated for the cost today, it was about 13.1 trillion over the whole of the Cold War in 1996 dollars. So let me see if I can go and find something that would say what that would be in modern dollars. Let's
So
see.
it looks like, let's see here. If you adjust for inflation, that would be about 27 trillion in 2025 dollars over the course of the Cold War.
So 27 trillion, and the Cold War went on from about 1949 or so all the way up to 1991. So if we were to take that, that's about $1 trillion a year, well, a little under $1 trillion a year. It's like $900 billion a year. So actually, crazily enough, that's very close, if not on par, with our current military budget that we have right now, which is about $1 trillion. So fairly close, actually. We were spending about this amount during the whole of the Cold War every single year on the military, at least adjusting for inflation. So a big
Let's
thing.
see, what was the main expenditure? I'm trying to pull it up right now. Let's see here. It looks like overwhelmingly it said maintaining a massive standing military and the nuclear arsenal was the main expenditure. So it looks like nuclear weapons production was a humongous money sink during that time period. Also, billions went into developing Polaris submarines, Minuteman missiles, the B-52 bombers, and the Manhattan projects, nuclear infrastructure, including Los Alamos and all those laboratories. Research and development. So yeah, it looks like mainly nuclear missiles was a huge portion of the spending, and also just simply trying to maintain the large active duty forces that we had at the time too.
You know, I mean, we spent a load of money back then, man, like tons. Like the amount of active carriers that we had in, I think, the 70s. How many carriers did the U.S. have in 1975? Let's see here. The United States had 6 fleet carriers in service, but we had way more. We had way more than that. Like that's like the high-end carriers, but let me see here. Let's go see. Aha, here we are. So, here are some of the carriers that were in service in the 70s. Well, during the 70s. The Yorktown, the Intrepid, the Hornet, let's see here. The Ticonderoga, the Lexington, the Wasp, the Hancock, Bennington. Let's see here. Let's get on down that list. The Bonhomme Richard. Let's see. The Kearsarge. The Oriskany. Let's see here. The Princeton. The Shangri-La. The Tarawa. Well, not the Tarawa. That was the Midway. The Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Coral Sea. The Valley Forge. The Saipan, which... an escort carrier in service in 1970. That's bizarre. The Wright, which is also an escort carrier. And let's see, the Forrestal, the Saratoga, the Ranger, the Independence, the Kitty Hawk, the Constellation, the Enterprise, the America, the John F. Kennedy, and then everything else was introduced in the 70s. The Nimitz, the Eisenhower, the Vinson, the Theodore, then the Theodore Roosevelt was in the 80s. So you can get an idea that the military was freaking massive back then, because nowadays I think we have about 8 aircraft carriers in operational service, and if you count all carriers back then, escort carriers and also conventional aircraft carriers, along with the nuclear ones, we had several dozen of them. So quite a large standing Navy back then, and also a large Army. Like the Army back then, along with the Marines, the Air Force, and so on, it was unbelievably large. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And also I see someone saying, a lot of those ships you listed were sunk in World War II. No, because this was in like the USS Hornet was in service in 1970. There's a picture of it from 1969, so a little bit hard for it to be sunk in World War II and still alive in 1969. It would be a ghost ship. Or the Intrepid. Here's a picture of it in 1968. Like, a lot of the World War II era carriers survived the war, and then they were just refitted with an angled deck, and then they would serve into the modern day as modern aircraft carriers. Conventional, at least in propulsion, but still modern in their abilities. But with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Louis Roscoe, puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Louis, for that support once again. And Louis said, could the U.S. admin be launching its military operations in Venezuela so it has an excuse not to come to blows with Russia should everything go tits up?
It's a possibility, but I also doubt it because it appears that this may be something to do with Chinese influence or trying to detract from some certain domestic news stories that were bubbling up and they're trying to bury them. So I do thank you so much for the support and help with this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Annoyed AF, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Annoyed AF, as well for that support. They said, sending love to all the moms and dads out there that raised the patriots currently serving our country, and that just sent our baby overseas last week, and may God bless and keep our sons and daughters safe.
Hey, and I thank you so much for the support, and I'd have to agree with you. Hopefully, our service members overseas will stay safe, and hopefully the leadership will keep them in mind when making their calls, because there are a lot of folks over there that could end up being at the very brunt of a Russian attack if we end up being too weak. And so big thanks to you so much for the support and help this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Jake Robinson, and thank you, Jake, as well. He said, how about Venezuela and Russia made a deal today, and Russia is going to protect them because they made a deal for trade, and is that a bad thing since the USA is going to invade them?
Not necessarily, because Russia also made a defensive pact with Iran, and then we bombed them, and then Russia had no response to that because they are scared of us. And also they have no power projection abilities either. So if we invaded Venezuela, there's not really a lot that Russia could do to try and help them. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Numeran, and thank you, Numeran, as well. He said, in your opinion, was the Finland ammo hoard and the Canadian soldier in the next country a coincidence that passed away?
I would say that it may be a coincidence. We haven't really heard what the investigation has uncovered, and generally, I don't like to speculate on folks' deaths too much. Just a personal conviction of mine. So I'll wait until the official investigation concludes, and hopefully they'll release their results. But still, a big thanks to you once again for the support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Arar983, and a big shout to you, Arar, for that support as well. He said, Crab Rangoon Fund. Please take one for the chat. LSA and Slav Ukraine on this excellent Friday.
And thank you so much for the support. And we will make sure to get some crab rangoons. Matthew, have you ever had one?
No, I've never had a Rangoon.
He's going to have a Rangoon. They're great. They're really good. And I thank you so much for supporting that fund. That is a great and wonderful and incredible fund. Truly well-deserving. And I got to thank you so much once again. And we will make sure to get a question in your honor. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And this one goes to Sean Willem. And he said, what does Article 4 actually do? And basically, to put it really simply, Article 4 is simply consultations on the possible invocation of Article 5. When any party feels threatened, they can call an Article 4 meeting. It basically means that all the NATO ambassadors or representatives must meet together. It can be electronically, it can be in person. The last time that Poland requested one, which was just a week ago, they met in Brussels. And this time, it's unclear where they're going to meet. Maybe back in Brussels, most likely again, but that's what it is.
Back to NATO HQ. So a huge thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well, but that is NATO Article 4 in a nutshell. The shortest article, the shortest subsection in the NATO charter, but still, that's what it is. It's pretty much a free consultation. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to ABCD, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support. He said, in Eastern Europe news, they comment that Queen Camilla's blue dress next to Melania's yellow dress from the Ukraine flag colors is a coded message of support. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think people read into that sort of a deal too much. It was probably coincidence, to be honest, because the current foreign policy actions of the United States are very confused and erratic. So there really is no underlying support there, at least from what I can tell. And also, usually people read into those sorts of things a lot, like people would wear dresses and stuff to, show a message. It very rarely happens like that, at least from what I've known. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have another 20 from Numeran, and thank you, Numeran, as well, for the second support, a 20 right there. He said, I happen to like it when you go pit bull mode and call it the BS, and here Ukraine is kicking arse, but has shown NATO and the USA are wimping in the face of Russia. And can you take a question elsewhere?
We could take a question elsewhere, maybe outside. Like maybe we could do that. I thank you for the support. Generally, I don't like to sound aggravated, but it's really hard to hide frustrations. We've been pretty good at hiding frustrations for years now with a lot of what goes on. But it's really hard to like just to explain it. It was really frustrating in the last administration because the last administration would miss a whole bunch of things to do or they should have been doing, but there really wasn't a way to voice that out in a way that it makes it sound like we're really dissatisfied because they like did nothing. And it's really hard to respond to quite literally nothing. They really didn't do anything good or bad. Well, they did a lot of things, in my opinion, that weren't really the greatest, but they didn't really do anything good either. But it wasn't because they were actively doing that. It's just because they did nothing, and that was just how it worked. So we would voice frustrations a good bit, but when you see someone who's doing a lot of stuff, and it's like all of the wrong things to do, in foreign policy at least, not speaking on the domestic matter, but in foreign policy, it's literally all of the wrong things to do, then it's just hard not to get incredibly aggravated because it's not bad actions because of inaction. It's bad actions by actively taken, consciously decided actions. And it's like, how in the hell are these the actions taken? Like, I'll be just completely straight up with y'all. In the last administration, I thought it couldn't really get worse than this, and I thought whoever gets elected, they're probably going to start facing the Russians down pretty well eventually. Like, we even told you all that. Like, I told you, oh, don't worry, no matter who wins, if the guy who's in charge right now wins, he's going to try and make it work with the Russians over a couple of months. That'll fail, and then you'll just get really aggressive on them. And honestly, that was fine with me. I mean, a couple of months of stalling to get to a far more aggressive stance than what we already saw was fine, in my opinion. And that would have happened under the other administration as well if they had won. But then we saw that he tried to negotiate with the Russians. It failed. Then he said he was really displeased with them. And then he just went into limbo land for the last 10 months or so, and nothing has changed. And we're still at square one like we were in month one of the current administration. And that's what's really annoying about it, because it's like, it's well beyond the third time's the charm. This is like the 90th time's the charm, and we're still pretending like there's a chance at making this work. And he even admits when he travels around places that Putin isn't willing to accept peace and the whole thing's dead on its face because the Russians aren't really wanting to do what he said they wanted to. And then he still pretends like there's a chance that that'll work because he just, at this point, he's living in denial, and he doesn't even want to face the fact that there's no way to negotiate with them or get anything out of it to end the war by peaceful means. We just have to face them down and, as America, threaten them heavily with armed action, and eventually they'll back off. That's really the only last approach we have. Everything else has failed. So I hope that has addressed it well. Big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, the live chat question in honor of Numerian's question there goes to none other than Rosalie Love, who said, can you speak to whether enough people are signing up to join the armed forces, and how prepared are we to defend ourselves in multiple regions? And interestingly enough, Rosalie, after Poland was attacked, speaking about Poland, I'll save the United States for now, but speaking about Poland, after they got attacked with those drones the other day, thousands and thousands of Polish youth went to sign up for the Polish armed forces. So it looks like patriotism is still alive and well in Poland, and a lot of young people were ready to go to war, basically, with Russia over that incident. So that was reassuring to see that. Now, in the United States, I think we're still having a recruitment problem in the United States, pretty much amongst all the branches. And I don't think that's going away. I think that's still a problem. So I think they're trying to work on new recruitment strategies, but they got a lot of work to do. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it's actually going up a little bit in the United States. We're still having a bit of an issue with it, but in some European countries like Poland, they're seeing so many people trying to sign up, they're having to turn some of them away. So I hope that is addressed to the best I can. And big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh, breaking news, breaking news right now. We have gotten word that Putin is robbing himself. Russia is to seize the assets of international Satanists living inside of Russia. Putin is going to rob his own bank account and seize his own assets and give them back to himself. It's breaking news, folks, happening right this minute. So you heard it here first. But seriously, though, Russia is seizing the assets of international Satanists in their country. So apparently Russia has quite a few Satanists there, or otherwise they wouldn't be bothering with it. So quite interesting to hear that. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Trism 666, and thank you very much, Trism, for that $50 support right there. And Trism said, "Do you know what type of Japanese trail B the USS Barb was credited with blowing up, or would have been common at the time?" And I see they got credited I-1, but didn't see a train type listed, and train tangent go, and LSA.
From what I understand, the USS Barb sank a Japanese railway barge that was carrying a train, if I'm not mistaken. But let me go pull that up and just make sure. USS Barb train kill. Let's see.
Also, by the way, people were saying real quick, people were saying Putin's really getting desperate for cash if he's robbing the Satanists. It's getting desperate. He's robbing the Satanists of all their cash and taking it. So the Russians' economy is going down the toilet.
I mean, honestly, it's a little wild. Also, so here's how it actually happened with the Barb, just to get a quick little rabbit hole. I don't know a lot about the Barb, but apparently from what I'm reading, it was some sort of an away team that they sent on shore from the submarine that planted a bomb on a Japanese steam engine and blew it up. I don't know where that happened, and I haven't really gotten a lot of additional information on that, but that seems to be the story for the larger part, is that it was actually an away team that blew up a train on shore, which is pretty cool. But a big thanks to you for the support, and I hope that does address that the best I can, Trism 666, with the limited knowledge that I have on that particular story. But still, a huge thanks to you so much for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And also, folks, I gotta be honest with y'all, isn't it a little bit crazy that he's robbing the Satanists? Like, that's a little wild, man. You know, like, out of everyone he could have picked, he picked everyone in the Russian government to rob. That's nuts.
Honestly, it's crazy. Like, oh, and also it's like to rob that really must mean there must be a lot of Satanists inside of Russia, because if they're going through the trouble of codifying the fact that they're going to take the Satanists money and seize the assets of international Satanists, let me click on that and see what the hell. Let's see here. Yeah, it says international Satanism movement. The Russians are calling it that. They're saying that apparently it's, let's see here. So yeah, international Satanism movement. I'm not really sure what they're calling that here. Let's see here. But yeah, they're saying that they're actually saying real Satanist. So apparently that's a pretty large thing in Russia, or otherwise they wouldn't bother with it. So yeah, also it says here, it says Satanism refers to any ideology or religion that venerates Satan, supernatural entity who embodies evil. This says it's not known how many people adhere to Satanism in Russia, but it must be a good bit because they're taking their money.
Man, I gotta be honest with you, apparently the Satanists are loaded in Russia. Who would have thought? Like, all those oligarchs with that money they got. I mean, you know, that's a crazy sort of a thing. But, you know, that's so stupid. That's that propaganda-coded shit. Some people in America are gonna eat that up like flies on shit. They're gonna be, oh, they're taking all the Satanist money. And it's like, oh my God. Like, some people are really goofy with that whole sort of a deal. But this is like, you know, it's like the Satanists, by the way, aren't going to be Satanists. They're just going to be people that Russia deems are Satanists or something like that. But they got to put a religious codification in it so that way it doesn't get a whole bunch of Western backlash. So that way people who are ultra religious will think that it's a good thing when it has really nothing to do with religion. It's just got a veil of it to make it seem like it's good or something like that. I mean, like, if anything.
Yeah, it seems like they're, based on what I'm reading here, I'm trying to get a little bit of a read on it. It looks like they're saying that anybody that's against the Russian Orthodox Church is labeled a Satanist. So it sounds like this could be a damn, that was so loud, man. That blew my ears out right there with that one. But it looks like anybody that goes against, or that the Russian government deems is going against the Russian Orthodox Church, is considered a Satanist, at least according to what I'm reading here. So this could be one of the first actual laws that Russia's passing that basically says they're going to take the money of citizens they don't like, basically. So honestly, it sounds like Satanism is just a cover term for people that they don't want to have any more money. They need to take money from someone. So they're going to label people Satanist, rob them their money, and leave them destitute, basically.
You know, it's like that's the most ironic thing. Because it's like if any sort of a group could be called Satanist, I think the Russian Orthodox Church probably would have the biggest claim to that, because it's not even a Christian church; it's a state apparatus of propaganda by the Russian government, and has been that way since the 1930s in the Soviet Union. Like it's known by everyone in the world at this point. The Russian Orthodox Church isn't even really a church, and it doesn't even practice any real Christian doctrine. It's literally just a propaganda tool for the Russian government, because the Russian Orthodox Church is literally attached to the Russian government, and they also have to get authorization for what they teach doctrinally from the Russian government. So it's like it's not even a real religious institution. It's a literal sham. I mean, you know, there's like literally every other religious institution out there has a better claim of being a genuine religious institution than the Russian Orthodox Church. It's absolutely crazy how they work that in Russia. But
Yeah.
anyway,
And also it sounds like the Russians are basically just going to start going up to anybody, kind of like a Salem witch hunt type situation, and saying, "Are you loyal enough to the Russian Orthodox Church?" And they'll be like, "Yes, I am. Please leave me alone." And if they aren't convinced enough that you're with the Russian Orthodox Church, they're just going to run your pockets. Basically, they're going to take everything you got, empty your bank account, and take it all. It sounds like so. I think that shows how desperate they're getting. I guess that's how they're going to solve the crisis they're having economically. They'll start running the pockets of the civilians until eventually everybody's so broke that they, can't even hardly buy food anymore.
yeah, man, it's like nobody is even like if we get the religious breakdown of Russia, I don't really think that many people are Christian in Russia or even Russian Orthodox. Let's see, religious demographics of Russia. Let me go get that really quickly. Ah, yes. Oh, yes, I see you know your Judah well. Good one. Oh, wow, there's not a lot of people who are Christian in Russia. Wow, look at that. The defenders of the Christian faith, only 47% of the country identifies with Christianity, with 41.1% of them being the Russian Orthodox Church.
Oh wow. Let's see here. They've got 25% believers but do not profess a particular religion. How's that
Atheists.
work?
It's agnostic. Like they believe that there's a God out there, but they don't know who he is, so they don't profess like a particular religion, but they believe in a greater being, or they're atheists.
Interesting. I've never heard it described like that. But no, there's atheism down there at the bottom. It says
13%.
13% atheist. No, so believers. Well, I mean, if they don't profess a religion, then what are they believing?
Actually, interesting enough, that's kind of like an Enlightenment era theory. Like a lot of the people, like let's see, what was his name? Isaac Newton was actually one of these people. He stated that he didn't believe in the Christian God, but he believed that there was some sort of a greater designer of the universe and man out there that was kind of like a great clockmaker who made the mechanism work for us to exist, but he didn't say that it was the Christian God. So that's kind of how that works, in a sense. Like, they don't say that it's the God of Islam, like Allah, or a God in Christianity, or God in Judaism, or any other religion. They just believe there's something out there, but they don't know who he is.
Huh, that's an interesting take on that. I haven't really heard that before, but yeah, it's quite interesting there. Also, looks like 6.5% Islamic. They've got 0.1% Hindu, 0.1% religious Jews. Let's see here, Buddhism 0.5%. Also, 5.5% not stated. Oh, they're going to be the first ones to get their bank accounts emptied. I'm
Oh,
sure the
yeah.
not stated ones, they're going to be going for the bank account. I'll tell you what for that. But I have a feeling that they're going to start even questioning the people that fall into the Orthodox Christian category too. They're probably going to start questioning everybody based on the definition they're setting.
Also, let me show you this, because this is something that's actually crazy to me, is that people who are ignorant will believe that Russia is a real, like this is something that I actually see, because I listen to the propaganda stuff that they'll put out, and people say that Russia is a based country, they're Christian core, or some stupid shit, like, that stupid terms they use nowadays. So let me show you this. Funnily enough, the United Kingdom, which a lot of people say is just completely godless, like in the propaganda about Russia's real Christian coded, Western countries aren't. The British actually have about the same number of people who are Christian in Britain, percentage-wise, that are inside of Russia. So it's like, how in the, I don't really know how in the world people make that kind of an argument, because it's like, most European countries are about as Christian as the next. And then if you look at that compared to the United States, there's like no comparison. Let me go show you all that. Let's see, religious demographics. of the USA. Well, let me go get that really quickly. So here's the religious breakdown of the United States. And the United States is Christian to such a degree. It's one of the few religious demographic pie charts where you'll actually see that they break it down between the Protestants and the Catholics, with Protestants making up 44.8%, aka the same percentage of all Christians in Russia pretty much, and then Catholics make up about another 0.25%. Well, a quarter of the pie in this country of the religious breakdown. Then there's about another 2.4%, which are Christians, which are like the Jehovah's Witness, Latter-day Saints folks. And then you have 4.10% of other religions. And then everyone else is religiously unaffiliated, which is like agnostics, atheists, and so on. So they're like, it's absolutely crazy to me, folks, when propaganda like the Russians put out will say that America is godless. Like, you know, like they don't believe in the Christian God, but Russians do, because that's a huge part of their propaganda that they target towards the Christian populations in America. This is like America has a far more greater claim of being a Christian country just by the statistical percentages than Russia ever does, but Russia tries to paint the picture inverse in the propaganda that they project into the country. It's a really bizarre sort of a thing.
That's the catch, Grasshopper. That's the catch. They're running both sides of the argument. That's the whole psyop. They're on one side of the argument they're running. They're saying, "Hey, look, America is godless." The other side of the argument they're running is, "Look, America is so godly and Russia is wrong." They're doing anything to create division. Like that's the Russian psychological operations modus operandi is to do that. So they're running both sides. They just have bots saying different things at different times.
Man, but the big one that they do, like the hugest one that they do, is that they are a just supremely Christian country. Like everyone in Russia is Christian, all the laws are Christian. Like, and it's so crazy, folks, because it's like Vladimir Putin's biggest guy outside of him is Ramzan Kadyrov. And who is he? He's Islamic, and he leads an entire Islamic republic within southern Russia. So it's like in America, people go crazy when a police patch just has Arabic on it because the community is largely Islamic and Arabic immigrants. In Russia, they have entire autonomous republics that are Islamic, and then people in America who fall for this propaganda, which has no real basis in reality, will just fall for this stuff 100% and just go, "Oh, Russia's just way more moral than we are. We're completely immoral," based off of the Christianity argument, and it doesn't even really exist in the actual statistics. It's a weird sort of a thing. Not getting religious here, folks, but I'm just trying to break down how Russian propaganda presents itself and the actual reality of the matter in the statistics that are broken down from there. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rye Guy SR, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Rye Guy, for that $20 support. He said, "You guys are awesome." And thank you very much, good sir. He said,
Hey.
"Can we discuss the Belarus developments recently, the lifting of sanctions, which may or will help Russia, and the releasing of prisoners, and the U.S. attending the Zapad exercises, and LLT, LLC?"
The U.S. military observers are just there by principle. They're usually always there in a very small number. And as far as the lifting of sanctions on Belarus, I believe we lifted the sanctions on a singular Belarusian airline, and that was about it. And I also think that we're exchanging some prisoners with them. It's not really anything huge, and it's not really going to benefit Russia a great deal, but I also think that's not the right move to make. Belarus is a puppet of the Russians and should be treated as such. And so a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Philip Harrison, and a huge shout out to you, Philip, for that $20 support. He said the British are coming.
And I thank you for the support. The British are coming. Be ready. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Blind Man, who puts in that $20 donation. And thank you very much, good sir. He said, "Thank you for the news. And I'm heavily invested in the military, and my news keeps focusing on something different. And so as for accurate information and coverage, thank you very much."
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying our channel and having some kind words to throw in about it, because we help the folks that know what's really going on out there in the world, and we're happy to be in that kind of a position and pretty much be in the top 100 live streams in the country every day. So a huge thanks to you once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Deminoac, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much for that support as well. And they said, "Great channel, guys."
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying the channel, Deminoac. We're always happy to know that you're enjoying it all the way from Canada, and we're always happy to be here every single night for folks like you. So a huge thanks to you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Cameron, who said LOC and give these guys a big thank you and like the video and appreciate the work, guys.
Hey, and please do give us a like, folks, and give us a little thanks if you like. I mean, we do great work. I'm just kidding, by the way. Y'all don't have to give us a thanks. You can tell us F off, and then we'll ban you. But beyond that, a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And thank you for the kind words and the support, because you're helping us to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Elphany, who puts in the 10. And Elphany said, Russia is doing to NATO what U.S. is doing to Venezuela. They are provoking NATO to attack, so they have a global excuse to declare war and attack back.
But the thing is, though, is that unlike Venezuela, which is truly on their own, if they provoke NATO, they're not provoking just Estonia. They're provoking the whole alliance. And the Russians cannot win that. We can win against Venezuela because they will be on their own. Russia can't win against NATO because it's the largest military alliance on the planet and the most powerful one at that. So that's kind of where the dichotomy between the two exists. And that's why the Russians ought to learn not to provoke us, because we're not one to be trifled with like Venezuela. But a big thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from David Lawson. And he said, the Russian people are finally feeling the economic costs of the war, and Putin needs an attack by NATO to keep the war footing and his people from revolting. And what say you?
I would generally agree. That's what I've been saying on the channel for a while, is that things are getting so bad, if the country's going to collapse anyways, might as well go out in a blaze of glory. And that's probably what they're starting to think at this point. So I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that the best that we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dallas Wayneman, and Dallas puts in a 10. He said, we need an operation similar to Chrome Dome during the Cold War, and we need planes consistently in the skies near the NATO border, and response time would be immediate and show that we mean business.
I would agree 100%. You know, I think we need to call it something new, though, something grand. Everything has to be covered in gold. Let's call it the Golden Dome. Yeah, that's a great idea. Everything is gold. Everything is gold.
Gold-plated justice. Call it, serve it justice on a platter. Make it a gold platter and serve them up that justice on a platter. I said, give it right to them. I said, give that to those Russians. I'm telling you, those Russians don't like that platter. They don't like the platter. I tell you what.
You know, I was sitting here thinking, what type of metal should represent America? Silver? No, that's too modest, too clean, too noble looking. We need something tacky, something that tells you that you're dealing in business with maybe someone who is a little bit tacky. We need something gold-plated. It's all gotta be gold. Cannot be silver or platinum or any other nice-looking metal. It has to be gold. That tacky-ass looking yellow color that's really shiny. I'll be honest with y'all, I have a personal aversion to gold. It looks so damn tacky on everything. I think that silver is a greater metal, might be cheaper, but it looks way better. Look at silver, and then look at gold. The only time you'll see me putting up gold is on Christmas Day. Silver and gold, that old snowman from that stop-motion film, that Rankin Bass movie, sang that song.
You know something? You know something that they're not talking about anymore? I said, they're not talking about this enough. They need to be talking about it some more. I said, why aren't they talking about this? It's something that needs to be talked about. They're not talking about those rolled gold. You remember those pretzels? Those wonderful pretzels they have on the aisle 5 in Walmart. Rolled gold. Old-fashioned term. Salted pretzels, roasted to crispy perfection. They don't talk about those very much anymore, but they go great with milk. Try it with milk. Some nice 2%. They said, this is the unheard 2% in the milk. Have some with it. Rolled gold.
I gotta be honest with you, that old gold thing is really deep, and I saw someone say silver tarnishes, though. Well, if you're a rich roller like me who rolls around with the dillies, then you ought to be able to spend a belly to have someone shine up that silver. I mean, it just looks better. I mean, look at it. When you look at something in silver, it looks clean. It looks great. And I have to say that it's a really bizarre sort of a thing. It's really bizarre, I'll be entirely honest with you, that was the sort of a deal. Also, by the way, Matthew, did I misclick?
Well, misclick? Misclick what?
You said LSA Rock's banned? Who in the world got banned? Where and what for?
Oh, no, I think they're talking about the channel.
What the hell's going on with that? That's absolutely wrong. We're going to get the Justice Department on that. They're going to reverse the whole thing. It's going to be
Man,
like,
look, we're shedding viewers, man. Stop.
why stop? But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jake Robinson, who puts in a 10. And Jake said, in Canada, we can't even defend ourselves. We can't even own pistols in Canada. And under 18-inch rifles. And had thousands of guns banned. And look it up. People that don't know Canada's laws.
I would have to say it's a bizarre thing in some countries that you don't have a right to defend yourself in your residence. That's a fairly modern thing. Over most of history, you always had a right in every single one of these countries to defend yourself in your own home. And I don't really feel like that's something that is even debatable. It's like, shouldn't you feel like you're safe in your own house? Like if someone breaks into it, shouldn't you have a right to defend yourself by any and all means at your disposal? Like, I feel like that should clearly be the case. It's a weird thing that that's not the case anymore in most European countries and Canada, but I'll be honest with y'all, it's a fortunate thing that is the case in the United States. I think that the United States is really fortunate for that fact, but still, a big thanks to you once again. And I had to be honest with you, not getting into the politics of foreign countries, but I do find that ridiculous that you do not at least have a modicum of a right to defend your own self within your own house in most countries. It's a weird sort of a thing. But still, big thanks once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sika Games, and they put in a 10 and said, outside of Ukraine, when is the rest of Europe going to grow some balls and defend their skies? It's sad that the Turks have some marbles more than the EU.
I'd have to say the reason why they don't have any balls is that they don't really know if there's going to be any major backing for them having balls. Like, let's say they shot down a Russian jet. Well, is the U.S. going to condemn them for that? Like, they don't really know, and they don't really want to catch that kind of heat because then they're literally on their own. The Russians are going to go after them. There's no larger American support, and then there's been a whole NATO-wide alliance crisis that's been created out of that, and that's generally why we're seeing that a lot of them don't have the balls to defend their skies when they should be. Because we've always seen whenever you kind of get to pull back the curtain of what makes the Wizard of Oz the Wizard of Oz, the United States is always back there, like they were in the prior administration, threatening everyone in Europe with an inch of their life that they better not respond or else there's going to be consequences. We saw that a lot in the last administration, and I'd certainly assume that the current administration is doing that as well. So with that, I thank you once again for support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Praptor, who puts in a 10. And Praptor said, I wanted to say this earlier, but I was working. Why is NATO more afraid of Article 5 than our enemies? It's rhetorical. Take one from the chat and LSA.
And that's a good question, and it is rhetorical, and we will make sure to take one from the chat. And what do we got, Matthew?
And the question from the chat goes to Kate Brown, who said, could everything that's going on in other countries that we seem to have a hand in all be set in motion as a guise to have the U.S. distracted and essentially a sitting duck for China?
I would say not necessarily, at least in my opinion. I don't really think that would be the case. I think that we're getting involved in other conflicts elsewhere because of a lack of a focus or direction in foreign policy. But I do thank you for the support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Ryguy SR, who puts in two $10 donations. And thank you very much, good sir, for the two $10 supports. He said, take one from the chat, and may the USA find a way to unite and overcome our differences. Long live the Republic. And also, he said, I wish all Americans prosperity during these clarity during these turbulent times. God bless the USA, LLTLSA, and Slava Ukraine.
And I would definitely agree. And long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the live chat question requested there goes to Joe, who said, have you heard anything about that Venezuelan general that defected today?
I actually haven't. I would have to, unfortunately, declare ignorance on that. But I hope that, unfortunately, answers the live chat well, at least from what I would know. I actually didn't hear about that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a $10 super chat here. Let me get rid of this bot real quick. But we have a $10 super chat here from Mark Dixon. And thank you very much, Mark, for that $10 support. And we do appreciate that very much. And we also have a 10 from Mind Freak, who said, is there any more updates regarding the tragic incident in the USA involving two Polish soldiers dying in an accident during training?
Unfortunately, we haven't really been able to get more details on that at the moment. If I'm understanding correctly, they were involved in some sort of a crash. And that's about all that's being said for now. It did involve, if I'm remembering the story correctly, a Black Hawk, and the Black Hawks these days have been reaching the end of their service life, so a lot of them have been having critical mechanical failures more frequently recently due to that fact. So that might be the case, but once again, that's just speculation on my end. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to TMBC, who puts in a 10 and said, thank you for the great channel.
Hey, and thank you so much for enjoying the great channel, and thank you for supporting it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kuhn. Is it Ku? What? How do you say this, by the way?
Which one is it? Which one? Let's see here. Let me go find it. I do not have the spreadsheet.
I've highlighted it in the spreadsheet. Oh, you don't have it open.
I don't have the spreadsheet open. Like, let's see here. I'm trying to find it really quickly. The other way, other means, I tell you. Let's see here. I think we just call that number 1.
Okay, we're going to call this number 1 right here. So he said that aircraft was missing a missile, and did something happen?
It may have just been loaded out with 3 R-73s from the offset, because we wouldn't really know what would have happened to a 4th missile. It certainly probably wouldn't have fallen off the pylon. That would be rare and really show a lack of maintenance. It's possible, but I have a feeling that it was probably only equipped with 3. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Razor Sharp, who puts in a 5. And he said the current full rate production is 96 interceptors per year. Fiscal year 2026 projection, industry could produce as many as 144 interceptors.
That's a decent amount, but still, dealing with a larger war with the Russians and also a drone war, we would need a lot of them, a load of them. But still, a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to X10man, who puts in a 5. He said Russia would never shoot down an aircraft entering their airspace, and see Korean Air 007.
Korean Air. Korean Air 00. That's the one that was shot down over that Sakhalin Island, wasn't it? Yeah, that was the one, yeah. Right here. This one. It was shot down over Sakhalin. Right there. Because
Sakhalin?
Yeah, the Sakhalin Island. Don't you know the Sakhalin Island is north of Japan? It's this big one right here.
Oh, yeah, I see now.
So it was flying to Seoul, and it flew over the Sakhalin Island by mistake, and the Russians thought it was a spy plane, and so they shot it down and killed everyone on board.
Oh, damn, that's bad.
Yeah, it resulted in the deaths of 269 people. So it was a pretty big situation when it happened. It happened back in 1983. So, you know, it's yeah, the Russians seem to have a little bit of an itchy trigger finger, you know. They did shoot down an aircraft with about 300 people on board. So, you know, I think that we ought to return them the favor, and when they fly a MiG-31 into Estonian airspace, pop it with a Patriot and see what happens. They can decide what to do from there, but we're not letting them in the airspace, simply put. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Derek Pruce. And Derek said, Putin is wanting NATO to shoot their planes down to have a reason to start World War III. What do you think in LOC?
I would say that they're largely trying to see how far they can get away with what they're doing right now without us having a response, and we continuously show them that they can just keep getting away with doing whatever they want. They aren't trying to goad the West into a world war, because who are they trying to persuade in the world that they're the victim? Nobody. Like the Indians and the Chinese, that's hardly anyone. The United States is trying to justify a war against Venezuela to all of our allies, which are in the dozens, and everyone else in the world, which is also additional dozens, if not over 100. Russia's just trying to, at that point, make the Chinese and the Indians think that they're the victim. But if you shoot something down inside of your airspace, and you're at war in Ukraine, and you continue to escalate against European countries like drone violations like recently, you don't really look like you're going up against an illegal cartel or anything like that, like with Venezuela. You're going up against a legitimate defensive alliance, and you're provoking them into a defensive response, which generally doesn't really pan out the same as what we're doing down in Venezuela and the kind of justifications we can make. So a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $5 support from Hoodoo, Texas. And he said, NATO wants to keep this war in Ukraine in the hope that the Russians will economically implode, and Ukraine is no question an unwilling proxy for NATO.
Well, yeah, that's true. But honestly, like whether they're an unwilling proxy or not, they have a lot at stake because if they end up losing because they don't like being a proxy to NATO, well, their whole people are now living as third-class citizens in Ukraine in their own country. So they have a lot to fight for, and we have a lot to support them for. They end up benefiting from this relationship, and so do we. But a big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Anders Wilhelmsen. And thank you very much, Anders, for that $5 support. Also, while we're at it, a big shout out to Jason Curling and Crispy, who each put in a 5 as well. And we appreciate all 3 of you very much for that support. And we also have a 5 from United Kempo Martial Arts Academy. And he put in a 5 as well and said, have you seen the video of Steve Irwin praising the A-10 Warthog? LSA, and take one from the chat. Big fan from Sydney, Australia.
And I actually have seen that video. It's pretty cool. He's like, wow, look, it's an AIM-9 side one. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Like, I actually saw that. And he actually, I think, flew in one of them. It was really cool. But a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're about to be moving on to the next one. But really quickly, someone said, apparently responsive to me saying wars sometimes happen, they're not great, but they have to. Someone said, because you don't understand the cost of war, the sacrifices, and the modern day consequences of war. Yeah, and you don't know the blistering feeling of defeat, and also what that turns into for a country, because you've never lived in a country that's been defeated before like that. So probably best not to talk about that, because it doesn't really seem that it's a good idea to say wars aren't really fighting because people die. Yeah, they do. It's unfortunate and it's a shame, but sometimes we have to do that. Like, you know, like sometimes firefighters have to go running into a burning building. I'm sure they don't want to, but they have to. Sometimes policemen have to get in the line of fire to stop a bank robber or some sort of a dangerous armed suspect. That happens. It's a part of their job. It's what you have to do. It's not a pleasurable thing sometimes living in life. Sometimes in life, just living your normal life, you run into things that you have to decide, what are you going to do? Like when someone breaks into your house, you don't have a choice at that point. You can either give up and let them do whatever they want, you know, ravage your family and rob you and possibly murder all of you and just sit there and let it happen, or you can fight back. You know, everything in life is not always a pleasant choice. But at the same time, sometimes taking what seems to be the easiest choice might lead to the worst outcome possible, and that's even more unpleasant than the original choice you were faced with. But with
I remember that show that John Quinones, What Would You Do? I remember that was a good show.
Yeah, yeah, like the shame of picking the wrong choice was usually worse than the decision you could have made itself. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Luke UK, who puts in a 5. He said, just supporting the Enforcer channel and LLT LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army. And a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who make it possible for us to say, long live the Lee Spring Army. And we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Devin Gibb, who puts in a 5. And Devin said, how many more times do you think Article 4 will be invoked before NATO starts responding?
I would say at this point, an unlimited number. It could be dozens of times, because every single time everyone just goes, oh, well, that was crazy. And then we just completely ignore it and move on. So I don't even know. I would say unlimited at this point. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Lone Star Robin, who puts in a 5. And they said, my son's in Alaska. What's sad Russia from going there?
What's stopping them from going there is the U.S. military that's in Alaska that would bomb a Russian naval landing force if they ever tried to get close. That's really what's stopping them. There's nothing that really stops anything from happening to us, rather than the fact that we have a whole bunch of guys that we put in neat little suits and neat little uniforms, and we give them a whole bunch of crazy wild weapons, and everyone generally has the idea that if they step foot on American soil, those little guys in those little uniforms with those little guns are going to start shooting at them, and they're going to be able to get them. And that's the only thing stopping the Russians from going to a place like Alaska, or anywhere else for that matter, is that our folks in the military are more than willing to fight and even die to defend the country down to the last man for the large part, and that's what generally stops anyone from coming over here. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Tom Stoles. And Tom just put in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Tom, for that support. That is the support that keeps this channel running, like we always say all the time, and we do sincerely appreciate that. And we also have a 5 from Jesse Schaefer, who said, are you guys familiar with Grizzly Step? And what are the chances of Russia executing a major cyber attack prior to any invasion?
Unfortunately, I don't really know a lot about the cyber warfare side. I do know a lot of people who would, but I generally am not one who would be well versed on that sort of a thing to be able to talk about it with a great deal of knowledge. And I know a lot of people usually expect answers from both of us, but I wouldn't really know enough about that to be able to give a good answer. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And we are on to the next one.
Honestly, I think if there was a cyber attack component, like for example, the question was, what are the chances of Russia executing a major cyber attack prior to an invasion? I think the Russians would probably enlist the Chinese to do that. That's probably what they would try to do, because the Chinese are a little bit more skilled, in my personal opinion, than the Russians. Now, don't get me wrong, the Russian military might be incompetent, but the Russians have very, very competent cyber operators. Like their cyber operators are world renowned. That's one area that they actually invested well in, and it actually paid off. Not the military, though. Their military has a lot to, want, basically, when it comes to their skills. But Russia's certainly capable of launching a cyber attack. But I think China has a little bit more of a burrowing into our networks to actually cause real damage to European countries and the U.S.
Yeah, they actually do. That's one thing that China and Russia are an incredibly competent force at is cyber warfare, actually. One of the few things that they're incredibly good at. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than Aurora Uplinks, who puts in a 5. And they said, would you care to talk about the process that goes into presidential actions, or what it's like working out of the White House?
I would say,
Are we talking about pre 2024, or are we talking about after 2024?
I would say that in both administrations, pre and post 2024, I would imagine that it's probably a living hell. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's probably an absolute living hell. In the last one, there was like nothing going. Well, there wasn't really nothing going on, but it was kind of like a chicken running around with its head cut off. There wasn't really like a central brain running the whole thing, so it's just like sporadic neurons firing off in the White House. This time, though, there's just one neuron firing off, and if you disagree, that neuron obliterates you and throws you out. So, it's not great either way. It's probably like a burning firestorm in there at any point of the year these days. But as far as the presidential processes are working right now, the president gets almost no advisement on anything. If he gets advisement he doesn't like, you just get removed. Like, that's literally how it's going at this point. If you don't believe me, go pull it up. There was a general recently that was actually dismissed and forced to retire because he told the president that Operation Midnight Hammer may have not been as successful as they would have liked it to be. So he was literally removed from his position immediately because he said that the results may have not been great, or the greatest that they could have ever been in history. Allegedly. But it's not really a great thing. And also, it doesn't really appear that there's a lot of advisement being listened to. It looks like a lot of actions are made just based off of what someone thinks without really bouncing it around the room to see what other advisors in the cabinet would think. And then if those decisions turn out to be bad, someone else is blamed. And then if they turn out to be good, then it was the greatest decision ever made on the planet. So that seems to be what it is right now. And then in the last administration, to speak about how the presidential process worked then, still a firestorm, still terrible to be there. But the last administration, you could go up and ask what was going on, and you would be told that the rice is fermenting and the cheese is done, and there's a mountain in China somewhere or something, and then you would just wander off and have to figure out what to do. So, not really
wrong, sir, wrong. The last administration, the way it worked, according to the bystanders that were sort of hanging around the administration, things like that, is generally speaking, most of the decisions would be made by the advisors, and the signature would be gotten from the president, and there wouldn't be much review of it. So it went from having way too little involvement from the president to way too much involvement from the president, from administration to administration.
Well, yeah, that's what I said that in a very political way, though, Matthew. I was like, they go up and get like a whole bunch of nonsense, and then they go and have to figure out what to do, and that meant they were going and pretty much doing what they wanted, and just getting a signature. That's the way I was trying to put it really lightly, like honestly.
Isn't that kind of crazy that we went from one extreme to the other? Like, we went from one extreme where the fella, and obviously, I'm just looking at it from a human point of view, like, bless the guy's soul. He's honestly way too old to be there, and also obviously he wasn't quite in the right state of mind. I think most people can agree on that. Just from a human's perspective, that was kind of a bit of a sad thing to see that. But went from that situation to the president wasn't really sure about much, till we went to a different extreme where the president is so sure about everything, he's not really open, or at least from what we're hearing, he's not open to hear much advice. So, quite, I wish we had a little bit of down the middle approach. That'd probably be pretty good, but we don't really have that.
Balance. Like, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for balance, like everyone used to have. literally before these two. Like, I don't like that's not even, that's like really sad, but I'll be honest with y'all. Like the political era from about 2016 onwards is completely different than any other political era in the country. You can pretty much group everything from 1787 to 2016 in one group, and then everything from 2016 onwards in a totally different group of how things have been working. I just wish we could go back to the way it used to be, where there was some balance and people listened to advisors and people came up with really balanced decisions and treated the job seriously and were mentally present, and also didn't think that they knew everything. I wish we could kind of go back to that, because that would be a lot better than what we've been getting these days. And
isn't it kind of interesting, though, that as American society has gotten more divided and more extreme, that they're literally electing the same type of personalities that the society represents at this point? You have one extreme and another extreme. And what did we go from? We went from one extreme on one side to another extreme on the other side. That's literally what's being elected, is literally it's mirroring society, basically. The candidates that we're getting, it's mirroring the same thing.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I also saw someone say in the chat, the last one was okay though. Not really though. That's like electing someone who's literally like a dead carcass pretty much, and then having his cabinet run everything. That's not good. That's terrible. And also the decisions that were being made weren't always the greatest decisions. I mean, with the support to Ukraine, it was a trickle. With supporting Taiwan, that was a bottom priority like it is now. In supporting Israel, there was a lot of waffling going on. With supporting the Israelis, I mean, that was a common interest sort of a thing. They're going up against Iranian terrorist groups that are anti-American, so letting them bomb them for us was a pretty decent thing, and we would give a little trickle. On the loads of foreign policy issues, it was like there was really no leadership at all. To be honest with y'all, the results that we're getting right now are just slightly worse, crazily enough, than what we were getting back then. Because back then we were getting poor results from no leadership, and now we're getting slightly worse results from leadership that doesn't know what they're doing in foreign policy, but it is almost the same thing. And so I would really argue, at least for what's going on right now, that it really didn't make too much of a difference. And on top of that, we shouldn't be electing a president and then going, well, it's fine that he's not even mentally present, because at least his cabinet was kind of doing okay. Because we elect the president to lead, but to also get advisement from hopefully the brightest minds in every category in the country. That's generally what we're kind of looking for. So not really what we have right now and what we had back then, more so a balance between the two, where the president respects his advisors, but the advisors also respect the authority of the president. And we don't have that now, and we didn't have that back then in one way or another. But anyways,
come on, Marco, we're counting on you, Marco. Come on,
man.
Oh, Marco, come on.
And I got to tell you, man, the economy's been getting worse. Back in the day, they said that Hispanic folks were having to work 2 jobs in this country to get by. Now we got one Hispanic guy in the government. He's working 4. He's got 4 hats. That's
what I'm saying,
on.
man. That's why I'm rooting for Marco. It's a tough time out here. 4 jobs. I don't think I could take 4 jobs. That would be sinking me. I'd be in the low. I'd be in the dumps. I'd be sinking into that couch just like Marco was doing if I had 4 jobs.
Honestly, man, I don't even know how he's doing it, really, because he really is having to run, at least minimally, all 4 of these departments at the same time, which usually is enough to keep one person busy. Imagine how busy that guy is. He's got to be working 16-hour days these days endlessly. And he's honestly, man, he's probably begging to be taken off some of those jobs, or he's wanting to be, but he's scared to even say that because he's scared that he lose them all or something. But
yeah, some of those jobs are just figurehead jobs. You just put his name on it, and then they let the deputy take care of it. The deputy director. Yeah, they tell the deputy director, "Here, take that over." It's obviously Marco can't handle 4 director positions. That's insane. So he's just. I'm sure they call him up with some decisions, but I'm sure he delegates a hell of a lot of it, because you just simply can't handle 4 different agencies or 4 different departments at the same time. That's just too much.
Yeah, it's way too much. Way too much. But that's my 2 cents, folks, on the current administration and the last administration, as far as how it's been going to be in there and work with it. Of course, we're personally not in there, but that's generally how it's been going from what we've been hearing from folks. So, or what you can just physically see outside of the administration looking in at it. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Razor Sharp, who puts in a 4. He said, the MiG-31 is the same age as all of our fighters, but F-35, and a Russian air-to-air missile range is 90 miles, so 9 times 8 miles.
Yeah, that's a quite significant range, really. And I do thank you for the support and sharing that information with us. And the big thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 3 from Gary Tour, and he said winter is coming with fuel shortage.
And I thank you so much for the support. And winter is coming with a fuel shortage, and I hope it's not too cold for them this time. It's been warm for them every other time, and everyone had a lot of courtesy to give them that liberty. This time, it doesn't seem that they're going to be getting that courtesy, so we'll have to see how that works for them. But a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, let's see. You know, a question that I haven't really thought about since Marco holds, I don't know the exact number of positions he holds, like 3 jobs or something. I don't know which one it is. Is he getting like the salary from every single one of those positions? Like that's the question I would like to get answered. I don't think there is the answer out there. I'm not sure if the answer is. I would doubt it, but maybe. I don't know.
He's probably making more than the president at this point.
Yeah, I was trying to do a little research, and I'm seeing something from Forbes here. It looks like a YouTube video. It says he's not receiving 2 salaries or more, so it doesn't look like he's receiving the salary. It's not a real clear answer on it though, so that's kind of interesting there. But anyways, moving on from that, we have a $2 super chat from Robert Krogan, and he said, "Will the U.S. acknowledge trouble in Europe?"
I don't even know. Really, to be honest, I know that those are great questions, but I hate being asked them because at this point it's so unpredictable, it's hard to even give a good answer at all. So unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that. It's a great question, but it's just so unpredictable these days, it's impossible to really give a good answer. But I do thank you so much for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, a shout out to Jason Curling. He said he did a $5 sticker. And also, by the way, I was trying to see here. I was like, did I miss that or something? Let me go back and look real quick. Let's see here. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I do see it. Let's see. Did I call that off, Jason? Because I could have sworn I'd like put all those in there, but apparently I didn't. I must have missed that one somehow. But thank you very much, Jason, for that $5 support right there. And sorry about missing that, but we do appreciate it. And we also have a 2 from PUBG 416 who said, "Crazy world."
Honestly, it is really a crazy world out there. But I do thank you for the support, helping this thing to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Esteban Graves, as well as Mark Andre Burnett and Dubstep Kid 801. And thank you all 3, Esteban, Mark, and Dubstep Kid, very much for that support as well. And we also have a 2 from the Playmaker 1271, who said, "Clip that rant on NATO being cowards and post it."
Nah. Generally, I just like to keep the streams for what they are. Short content feeds into the psyops, and we're not into those psyops, are we, Matthew?
I'm not into those psyops, I tell you what. We're not trying to have everybody up in here with the Alice in Wonderland effect going on.
Oh,
nah.
hell no. Hell no. But a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I'm going to start a whole new psyop out here. As they said, I want to start a psyop myself. I'm going to, instead of calling it the Alice in Wonderland effect, I'm going to call it the Brutus and Popeyeville effect right here. We're going to have Brutus up in here, and he's going to be getting brainwashed for a change. Talking about taking his food from Wimpy, he's going to be giving Wimpy food for it's over with. But anyways, enough of that yapping. This one goes to Aurora Uplinks, who puts in a 2. And Aurora said, "Thank you, and have you seen the film The Blue Max?"
I have not, personally, but I actually saw a really good movie. I rented it after a show a couple of days ago, and it was called The Outfit. And it was a really low budget movie. It had like a budget, I think, of like $500,000 or something. Found that out, Matthew. I researched it. I was like, huh. And it had a box office, I think, of like 1.2 million. So this was certainly not a big movie whatsoever. This is not like a big blockbuster or anything like that. But unlike The Lighthouse, which I honestly thought was really overblown for how good it was, I thought The Lighthouse was kind of lame. The Outfit was great. That was a wonderful movie. I thought it was really like gripping from start to finish. Really, really suspenseful, honestly. It was so good. I got to give you all a recommendation of that movie. Y'all want like an hour and 40-minute long movie to watch? That was a wonderful one. Like, it was great. I thought it was wonderful. But I haven't heard of that one, though. And I will have to look into it and see about watching it sometime if I get the free time. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Blizoth, who put in a $1 support. And thank you, Blizoth, as well, for supporting the channel, and we do appreciate that. And it is now time to jump into our live chat questions proper and grab our Morse code decoders as well. So tonight, we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arable Garbo, Heroya Fluffnish, Kush, Kelpiel Terex, and Sire. They said, the Morse says, when are we going to stop taking all of this? This is outrageous and a huge provocation. LLT LOC.
And ding, 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 ding. That is the sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate the Morse code decoders for getting that right time and time again on the 1,304 day of the war. Whew, man, that's a long time, and I got to congratulate y'all on that. That's real impressive right there. Big thanks to y'all once again. And we also have another super chat. But also, Matthew, I saw that guy that you banned. Honestly, that guy was kooky, really. Like, he was a goof. But this guy said before Matthew banned him, "You're an idiot, comma, enough of your glaze. Blood, this ain't Krispy Kreme. We ain't glazing nothing."
Man, I bet they're hiring down there for head glazer at Krispy Kreme. Probably paying something like maybe $17 an hour. I don't know. Head glazer makes a lot of money.
Listen, buddy. There ain't no glaze around here, and I gotta be honest with you, pal. The only one who would know about glaze, you know who it is. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Knox Date, who put in a 5. He said, in your guys' opinion, in the last few months left, how do you guys think it'll play out inside Europe? Showing LSA some love, been here for a year. And Knox, here's how I see it breaking down basically over the next couple of months. What is happening right now is Russia is systematically testing NATO's resolve diplomatically. They're also basically mapping out our response times and our air defenses, and it looks like they're in the final stage before they launch some type of military provocation in a larger way against NATO. That's the way I see it breaking out. And it looks like Russia is planning on doing something imminently, because otherwise, let's do process of deduction here, or let's deduce the answer. What would Russia be doing this for unless they were planning on taking some type of military action? And honestly, I'm really at a loss for that. I really don't see any other option here other than some type of imminent Russian military action. Because otherwise, why would they be risking a harsh NATO response if they weren't, understanding that the risk was worth it to map out our defenses? So I think they've deemed the risk is worth the reward, and that's why they're doing this. So, Enforcer, what say you?
To be honest, I would agree with Enforcer Matt on that. I think that this is getting towards some sort of a Russian military action on NATO, and it's inevitable unless if things change. And really, the way that we keep talking about on air, becoming a lot more aggressive, is the only change we can see. We can't get more passive than this, and being passive isn't working. Things are getting worse. So clearly, we have to go the other direction, which is to become more aggressive. So that would be my 2 cents on the matter as well. But a big thanks to you once again for support, Knox State, and thank you for being here for over a year. I've seen you in the live chat, and I thank you for being here and supporting the channel. And also, on top of that, folks, due to time constraints, we're only going to be getting 3 live chat questions in the live chat segment here, and then we're going to be rounding this thing out for the night. And so we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to the original Mr. Wiggle, who said, do you think that NATO is waiting for winter to activate Article 5, and Russia would struggle big time to logistically support conflict with NATO in the winter?
That's probably not going to be a high possibility. Really, we're going to activate Article 5 in the immediate aftermath of something that happens. That's how it's supposed to work. So I think that would happen whenever the Russians attack us full on, if we even do it at all. And that will be whenever the Russians attack us. That could be during the winter, the spring, or the summer of next year. But I have a feeling it's going to be happening during at least the next 8 months, guaranteed, or even before the end of this year, really. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and also this one goes to Artis Zell, who said Russian culture is partial machismo and partial nihilistic, and they do not think in terms like you do in the West. You seek reason in action, and they do an action and then find a reason in their own flow of decision making. Honestly, you're right. Like, you're actually dead on the nail with that. Russian culture is very, very different from Western culture. They don't make decisions the way we do, and they think in very different terms. I basically hit it around the nail right there with the partial machismo, or machismo, however you want to say it. Basically, what that means is they have a very strong and aggressive masculine pride, and also they are partially nihilistic as well. The Russians think in very black and white terms, and also they think, I guess you could say they think instinctively is the best way to say it. It's very survival oriented. It's not really about thriving. It's more about survival. It's kind of like a weird way to live, but that's the way the Russians live. And it's also the way their governments operate too. So also, it happens to be very crooked in Russia as well. That's a carryover from the USSR. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, Matthew covered that quite succinctly. I have to agree with him on that. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one is going to go to Avari Mandabratis, who said, Turkey shot down Russian jets in Syria. Did Russia go to war with Turkey? No. Should NATO shoot down Russian violators? Yes. And what are your thoughts?
Exactly. That's what I was saying earlier in the stream. I'd 100% agree with you on that. We should not allow a violation of an armed aircraft of an enemy nation under any circumstances and let it slide. Those aircraft should be shot down instantly, and that should send a message to the rest of the Russians not to pull off a stupid act like that. Otherwise, they could end up getting that as well. That's what I think, and I would have to 100% agree with you on that. And so with that, we've actually reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching the show tonight and enjoying it. We had a big viewership tonight of 14,000 people, and over the course of the stream, we've gotten 99,000 views. I thank you all greatly for being here over the course of the night and enjoying our stream. If you did enjoy, please make sure to subscribe. We'd love to have y'all here, and we'd love for y'all to join the Lee Spring Army, which is the community of the Enforcer channel. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world, and most importantly, we'll also be getting a little short war video out tomorrow, most likely. Yeah, I don't know. We just might be doing that. And if it is, I'll be the one making it. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, that was a very abrupt end right there. It caught me off guard. But a huge shout out to the 100,000 people that were here by the end of the stream tonight. We appreciate every single one of you once again for joining us tonight. And a huge shout out to all the folks that supported the channel once again tonight. We do appreciate that very much. And we shall see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next night of War News streams, and at midday tomorrow as well for a short war video if there is enough news to cover. But in the meantime, folks, also a big shout out to everybody for helping us to reach 497,000 plus subscribers. We are getting extremely close to 500,000. That 500,000 mark, and we are very excited to hit that probably in the next few weeks, I'd imagine, maybe the next 2 weeks or so. Whoops, sorry, 2 weeks. But anyways, we will see you all tomorrow, and with that, Slava Ukraine, Heroes Slava, get some rest, and good night.